The Bard of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, Fighting in the Jungle. The Elf Path, a hidden path from a previous age, is a little-known route. Gazing at the familiar scene, Ino was struck by a sense of dread. This was exactly where he had arrived in Middle-earth. Back then, he'd found the woods eerie and chosen the steps. 2 days later, he'd arrived at his starting point again. Alright, let's release these ponies and let them return to their masters. Ino dismounted and addressed Bilbo and Thorin beside him. After all, these horses were a gift from beyond. After releasing all the horses, the dwarves surveyed the Mirkwood before them. They knew that taking the Old Forest Road or the detour via the Forest River would waste considerable time. If they wanted to reach the Lonely Mountain before the end of autumn, they would inevitably have to cross the forest. Is there no other way for us? Bilbo's face sank in fear as he gazed upon the eerie Mirkwood before him. We must reach the Lonely Mountain before Durin's Day. Only then can we find the entrance. Thorin looked at Bilbo. There was no fear in his eyes, only enthusiasm. This enthusiasm grew more pronounced as they drew closer to the mountain. Thorin's behavior frightened Bilbo, and he involuntarily took a small step back. Seeing this, Ino smiled silently. Perhaps the dragon disease had penetrated the dwarves' very bones. Before we set out, I want everyone to hold a stone of antidote in their mouths. Mirkwood, encroaching under darkness, holds a bewildering poison in the air. As he spoke, Ino pulled a whole stone of dung from his suitcase and held it in his hands. Although Gandalf had introduced him before their departure, and everyone understood that the human before them was a wizard, the strange stone still caught the dwarves' attention. Can it cure poison? Thorin asked, a hint of doubt in his eyes. As you can see, it's used to detoxify, but the choice is yours. Despite his skepticism, Ino understood. After all, they had only known each other for a day. Even Bilbo, who had come all the way, was only fully accepted by the dwarves at the last moment. Thorin first gazed at the deep, gloomy Mirkwood. After a moment's hesitation, he took the initiative to break off a small piece and held it in his mouth. With Thorin's lead, the remaining dwarves also lined up to eat the fecal stone. PSSST, that smell. Stinky, rancid slop. Like Philly's stinky socks. And you sniffed my feet. Watching this chain reaction, Ino almost burst out laughing, but he ignored Thorin. Why don't you eat it? Thorin's eyes sharpened, and his hand grasped the hilt of the sword hanging at his waist. The other dwarves also stopped laughing and became wary. Me? Because I have this. It blocks everything. Ino drew his wand and gently nodded his head. The household magic bubblehead charm is often used in cooking to insulate ingredients with a pungent, rancid, and pungent smells, such as onions, peppers, and canned herring. Faced with this ironclad reality, Thorin said nothing and turned back towards the forest. The other dwarves, however, offered apologetic smiles. I apologize on his behalf. My uncle can be like that sometimes, so stubborn he can be terrifying. It was Thorin's nephew, the dwarf Keeley, who spoke, also known as the archer secretly in love with a woodland elf in the story. I don't mind. I just hope you can recapture the Lonely Mountain soon, Ino said truthfully. Having promised Gandalf, he was determined to ensure Thorin's passage through Mirkwood was as smooth as possible. The present moment was no big deal. Furthermore, his promise was based entirely on the story's development. After all, while Mirkwood was terrifying, the elves helped him in the original story, making the journey relatively safe. However, once he left the forest, everything had nothing to do with him. After all, that was all the promise he had made. Mirkwood. The entrance to the elven path was formed by 2 rows of large trees leaning against each other, looking more like a secret passage leading to a dark cave. Although it was his first time entering, Ino knew that in the story, they would encounter a dark creature similar to the acromantula, so he had already drawn his wand, ready for action. Entering the elven path, the space around them was very narrow, winding through the trees, with some places only wide enough for one person to pass. As they advanced deeper, the light at the entrance gradually faded behind them. The surrounding forest was utterly silent, so quiet that only the sound of their footsteps could be heard, and if they stopped, they could even hear everyone's breathing. At some point, a light mist rose from the forest, thickening and reducing visibility. Now, everyone could only vaguely see the backs of their teammates in front of them. "The sun is shining again." A determined voice echoed in the ears of all the dwarves, the tone firm and powerful. Then, they saw a golden light rising in front of the group, like the rising sun in the morning. Light pierced the darkness, encircling the entire team within a radius of several dozen meters. All the fog instantly dissipated, as if encountering a natural enemy. "That's a good move. Should have used it earlier. Who was behind me just now? Did they look when they walked? They kept poking me in the ass with their sword hilts. If you ask me." The first rays of sunlight also brought back their former energy to the dwarf team, and they began to chatter and express their opinions. "Don't be careless. We haven't even gone a tenth of the way yet. No one knows what lies ahead." Ino raised his wand and reminded the dwarves. After a brief clamor, the dwarves gradually quieted down, each gripping their weapons tightly and quietly on guard. After all, each of these dwarves was an elite warrior with their own strengths. Time passed slowly. Walking through the silent forest, it was unknown how much time had passed. Just when everyone was exhausted, the sound of flowing water came from afar, perking everyone up. Young Keely and Feely ran towards the source of water at a rapid pace. "Stop. That stream is tainted by dark magic," Ino shouted. Perhaps thanks to the sunlight charm, he was gradually gaining influence within the group. The most obvious sign was that Keely and Feely stopped immediately upon hearing his voice. "If you want water, drink what you brought. If anyone runs out, come ask for more. There's absolutely plenty of water. But don't touch anything here unless you can," Ino explained to the dwarves. "He's right. We need to get to the Lonely Mountain as soon as possible. Everything else is trivial." Thorin, who had been silent until then, stepped forward to define the situation. He then looked around, seeing tired faces everywhere. "We can rest for a while now. Keely, be on guard." As the last king of the Dern line, Thorin's every word was strictly followed by all the dwarves. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 77 Legolas. Just as all the dwarves unpacked their bags and prepared to eat and drink, something's nearby. Be alert. The dwarf Keely, taking advantage of the moment, instantly drew his bow and shot an arrow. The sharp arrow pierced the air and disappeared into the dense forest in the distance. Then, a shrill roar echoed from the forest. Without hesitation, all the dwarves nearby dropped their food, quickly drew their weapons, and formed a circle, ready to fight. As fate would have it, the dwarves in the dense forest were also attacked by giant spiders. Following the shrill roar, spiders, much larger than the dwarves in both height and size, spread their claws and swarmed from all directions. Rip apart. Responding, Ino raised his hand and unleashed a cutting spell. After all, in this dense forest with numerous shelters, magical attacks were much more effective than physical ice arrows. In the distance, the two fastest giant spiders were cut in half by the momentum of the attack, as if by invisible blades. This was like a clarion call. Within the dwarven circle, Keely and another archer also launched ranged attacks. A fierce battle had begun. Even facing the massive giant spider, the melee dwarves showed no fear, taking up their weapons and engaging in exceptionally valiant combat. Standing in the circle, Ino waved his wand relentlessly, firing a barrage of spells like an automatic rifle. Though the frequency was rapid, most of the attacks were barrier and repulse spells. After all, the dwarves were too close to the giant spider, and a single careless strike could easily result in an accidental injury. Elsewhere, a giant spider descended from the sky, aiming for Bumber, the heaviest dwarf wielding twin axes. Just as its venom was about to bite him, a flash of red light flashed. Then, as if bound by invisible ropes, the entire spider fell stiffly to the ground with a muffled thud. Responding, Bumber swiftly struck the spider with a single blow, then wielded his axes again to engage the other giant spiders. After all, in such a turbulent battle, there was no room for distraction, especially for the warriors at the forefront. Finding an opening, Ino grabbed Bilbo. The little hobbit had been running around, sword in hand, fighting the air since the start of the fight. "Don't mess with this. Go and apply this potion to their wounds, and be careful yourself." He threw a bottle of white fresh essence at Bilbo. The battle dragged on. The giant spiders around them not only didn't diminish, but intensified, their numbers increasing. Looking at the endless stream of giant spiders, Ino felt the urge to set the mountain on fire. Of course, it was just an impulse. After all, the giant spiders were easy to deal with, but if they really set Mirkwood on fire, they wouldn't be able to escape. After all, no one had dared to set fire to the mountain in elf territory since the First Age. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Bilbo lived up to his reputation as a thief. The hobbit's natural agility allowed him to find opportunities to apply white fresh essence to the injured dwarves. With the help of the potion, the battle gradually reached a stalemate, and the dwarves barely managed to hold off the giant spiders. But defeat was only a matter of time. After all, facing an endless stream of giant spiders, the dwarves' energy and physical strength were always limited. Swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Amidst the exhausting battle, countless arrows streaked through the air, making crisp sounds, instantly clearing out a vast swarm of giant spiders. Then, a whole group of woodland elves, gracefully descending from the sky, treading on tree trunks and using the silk threads left by the giant spiders. Landing on the ground, the elves attacked the giant spiders without hesitation, using long swords, short blades, bows and arrows, daggers. Every weapon was smoothly switched to suit the needs. From afar, the elves looked like they were at a ball, dancing a death waltz, relentlessly reaping the lives of the giant spiders. Ino witnessed the power and grace of the elves of Middle-earth. Although most of them lacked magical powers, their fluid swordsmanship alone was enough to overwhelm many wizards. Imagine their nimble footwork coupled with a high-speed attack, one strike after another, leaving you no chance to cast magic. Unless the wizard casts the shield charm first, falling prey to the elves' rhythm is truly dangerous. If they had that skill, they might be the next Gryffindor. Ino watched the elves in battle eagerly. It couldn't be helped, the elves' fighting was truly graceful. Every turn, every blow, was perfectly timed to the beat of a drum, like the music of nature. After watching the elves perform, he also thought that if this same dexterity were applied to a magical duel, the effect would be truly remarkable. Legolas. In the woodland, Sindarin, elvish tongue, it symbolizes green leaves, but it also refers to Mirkwood, the name given to his son by the elf king Thranduil. As a woodland elf prince, unlike his father, Legolas harbored a deep hatred for the forces of darkness. He never forgot the lives of his fellow woodland elves, and even the once glorious capital, lost to the encroachment of darkness. Many only knew of Dol Guldur, the lair of the dark forces, now occupied by necromancers. But they were unaware that the magnificent city had, thousands of years ago, been known by another name, Amon Lank, the capital of the woodland elves. This was the reason Legolas hated the forces of darkness. The headstrong prince often disregarded his father's objections and led his elven guards through the infested forests, hunting down its minions. But today, he seemed to have reaped an unexpected reward. After the elves had dispatched the giant spiders, they nimbly leaped onto tree trunks, then switched to their short bows and took aim at the circle of armed dwarves in the center. "Wizard, lower your wands," Legolas said calmly. The dwarves, however, were now completely ignored by the elves. "I mean no harm," Ino said, extinguishing the sunlight spell and quietly slipping his wand into his sleeve. As for disarming, forget it. He had already decided, if the elves dared to make such a request, he would flee on his broomstick. As for the dwarf group, whoever wanted to deal with them could do so. Perhaps due to the added power of the sunlight charm, Legolas stopped pressing and instead directed the other elves to disarm the dwarves. A moment later, Legolas approached the group. "I know you mean no harm, but you must come with us now. As trespassers in the forest without permission, I have the right to judge you." Facing the relatively friendly woodland elves, Ino nodded silently. "Okay, you're right. But I hope you'll treat the dwarves kindly. They didn't enter the forest with malicious intent." He wasn't too upset about being taken away by the forest elves. After all, the original storyline had always necessitated this fate for the dwarves. Similarly, in a way, the elves were the dwarf saviors, otherwise, those giant spiders alone would have nearly wiped out the entire group. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please vote. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please vote. Please vote. Chapter 78, Thranduil, the Elf King. Although the elf surrender infuriated the dwarves, the situation was overwhelming, and under Thorin's soothing influence, they could only keep their anger to themselves. However, there was a silver lining. Under the elves' guidance, they encountered no more minions of darkness along the way. The Woodland Kingdom. Since the year 1050 of the Third Age, when Sauron's shadow descended upon Amon Lank, evil creatures began to flourish in the Greenwood, transforming the once lush forest into the present-day Mirkwood. Thereafter, the Elf King Thranduil led his people to retreat north of the Forest River, completely abandoning the vast woodlands southward near the Misty Mountains. Although this move was widely criticized in Middle-earth, it is undeniable that it significantly reduced the casualties of the woodland elves. Perhaps this was the true meaning of saving lives and losing territory, otherwise the woodland elves would not have been able to muster such a large army in the Battle of Five Armies. Sadly, this misguided war resulted in heavy losses for the woodland elves, wiping out the strength they had accumulated over millennia. But having arrived, Ino intended to prevent this tragedy. He had also decided that the dazzling white gem necklace, the source of the entire war, so prized by Thranduil, would be stolen, even if it meant stealing. It wasn't a matter of position, it was simply a matter of visual perception. After all, human nature is such that we yearn for beautiful things. Compared to the elegant and beautiful elves, who would care for the slovenly dwarves? Furthermore, unlike other elves, woodland elves possessed an innate talent for art and music, and most of the music and poetry in Middle-earth originated from the woodland elves. Their creative talents, love of music, and beautiful voices, practically everywhere they go, give the woodland elves a unique charm among the elven community. This is a definite plus for a bard. He pondered as he hurried on. Led by Legolas, they crossed an exquisite stone bridge and arrived at the new capital of the woodland elves. It wasn't so much a capital as a massive, heavily fortified fortress. The elves abandoned traditional art and chose to build their city from thick granite. Towering walls and polished facades, combined with a nearby stone bridge, formed a natural triple defense. But this was only superficial. The elves' true home lay beneath the fortress. As if imbued with the genius of the dwarves, they had dug a vast and complex underground city. Led by Prince Legolas, they entered the fortress and traversed winding tunnels, finally arriving at the palace of the Woodland Kingdom. Thranduil. Arriving in Middle-earth from Amon at the dawn of the Second Age, he was only 6,000 years old, making him a young elf king. As they reached the palace, Ino took a closer look at Thranduil's features. He had the same flowing golden hair as Legolas, but Thranduil wore a crown woven from crimson leaves and berries. Such a simple crown seemed to speak of the woodland elves' love for the forest and nature. Amidst the long golden hair were a pair of deep and indifferent eyes, as if they didn't care about anything in the world. If Legolas had used the word handsome to describe him before, then the elf king Thranduil in front of him could only be described as beautiful. Beauty is never a word reserved for girls, because it can also be used to describe a man's temperament, the kind of beauty that is in harmony with nature. Describing Thranduil's beauty is like people praising the beautiful scenery of nature, and it doesn't seem abrupt at all. My son told me that a group of dwarves came from the west, and surprisingly, there was even a human wizard. Thranduil looked at the people in the palace calmly, ignoring the anger of the dwarves. Only when his eyes swept over Ino did a hint of inquiry and doubt appear in his eyes. Imprison these dwarves in the dungeons and let them sober up, Thranduil instructed the elven warriors nearby. Although he recognized the heir to the former king under the mountain at first sight, he didn't even look at Thorin. After a moment of chaos, the underground palace returned to its former tranquility. Gazing at the elf king not far away, Ino pondered for a moment before speaking slowly. Your Majesty understands the purpose of our pilgrimage. It's for the sake of the ancient legend that Thorin, descended from the dwarves of Durin, has come to reclaim the lonely mountain and restore the glory of the king under the mountain. For an elf who has lived for thousands of years, rhetoric is meaningless, only honesty is the best way to communicate. Sure enough, Thranduil slowly nodded in agreement. What are your plans for the entrenched dragon? Perhaps they want to kill it, but who knows? I'll help them escape the dense forest. At that moment, Ino spoke his truest thoughts. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Save this. Please recommend. Please vote. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote. Chapter 79 Divination, the first appearance of absolute numbers. Kill. Thranduil's face cracked a rare smile, as if he'd just heard something amusing. I suppose. Well, you haven't seen the dragon, have you? Hearing this, Ino realized belatedly that he'd been oversimplifying things. Yes, Your Majesty. I've never seen Smaug. At this point, Thranduil adopted a peculiar tone. The king under the mountain, the Arkenstone, the symbol of power. Supreme forging skills, razor-sharp weapons, and a vast array of mechanical chariots. The might of the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain was unrivaled in all of Middle-earth. At this, Thranduil burst out laughing. And what happened? That dragon, in a matter of days, shattered the entire 100,000-strong Durin dwarf clan in a flash. And now you're telling me to kill the dragon? The Lonely Mountain's boundless treasures have drawn the envy of all the powers of Middle-earth, yet why has no one taken action? Hearing this, Ino reaffirmed his oversimplification. All along, he'd been comparing them to the dragons of the magical world, but now it seemed the two weren't even on the same level. Okay, I was being presumptuous. But it's just my speculation. After all, Gandalf didn't tell me much before he left. Ino recounted the events truthfully. It wasn't a secret worth keeping hidden, after all. Mithrandir. Thranduil pondered upon hearing Gandalf's name. If it were him, perhaps you would succeed. After all, he's had a good ear for thousands of years. Perhaps thinking of something else, Thranduil slowly rose from the throne. One last piece of advice for you, young human wizard. Many things in Middle-earth can't be judged by appearances alone. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow evening, I'll relax the guards. Perhaps you can escape with the dwarves through the river mouth sewers. Thank you for your generosity, Ino said, bowing slightly. At that moment, any sense of pride vanished from his mind. The slight sense of accomplishment he'd felt from slaying the giant spider in the dense forest had been completely shattered. Middle-earth was always more complex than he imagined. The underground palace. Ino was led by another woodland elf into a room resembling a guest room. Though underground, the room was filled with a delicate natural fragrance, a blend of flowers, grasses, and woods, evoking a forest-like atmosphere. In the center of the room sat a bed woven from slender vines, covered with soft green leaves and petals. In one corner, there was even a small fountain, its water trickling down from a crystal-like stone into the pool below, creating a melodious sound. Sitting on the vine bed, Ino no longer cared to dwell on the future, simply letting the story unfold as fate would have it. Unlike his previous conversation with Gandalf, Thranduil was giving him a lesson today. The escape from the dungeon, the hunt for Smaug, everything was unfolding according to someone else's script. Middle-earth was always a world, not a village or a town. But his only question now was what role this outsider was actually playing. Thinking of this, Ino took a deep breath and slowly pulled a dice from its inner lining. He wanted to try another possibility. He silently recited the information he wanted to explore, then tossed the dice into the air. It traced a graceful arc in the air, then landed on the ground with a clatter. 1. Staring at this unprecedented absolute number, despite his ice magic and even his acclimation to the cold, Ino still felt a chill run through him, a chill that came from deep within. Time slowly slipped by. The silent room was now filled with only the dripping sound of the small fountain in the corner. For an unknown amount of time, Ino remained motionless, as if lost in some kind of deep thought. After a long moment, he slowly picked up the dice from the ground and tossed it again. Several dozen seconds later. Sleep. I really don't dare to meddle. Ino put away the dice and sighed as if he had survived a disaster. Then he lay lazily on the rattan bed, as if he had been cursed by the bone-picking curse. In contrast to the silence in the guest room. At this moment, the dwarves in the dungeon were engaged in a heated discussion. Some wanted to exchange a part of the treasure of Lonely Mountain for the help of the elves. But as soon as this was said, an uproar among the dwarves. They quickly split into two factions and began to argue. Those who agreed and those who opposed each held their own opinions. As the spiritual leader of the dwarves, Thorin looked at the dungeon wall expressionlessly at this moment. No one knew what he was thinking. Seeing that the argument was getting more and more intense, Balin, the most senior dwarf besides Thorin, had to stand up. We still have time. There's still a full week until the agreed time. I don't know what you're arguing about. Right now, we need to escape, not argue over wealth. Despite Balin's prestige, the dwarves trapped in the dungeon seemed particularly irritable. Someone immediately retorted, "We're trying to escape with wealth. Besides, the human wizard isn't here, and the hobbit has vanished. If we hesitate any longer, they'll get there first." A new round of arguments began. On the other side of the crypt. After resting for a few hours on his rattan bed, Ino slowly sat up. The Elf King had said the guards would be reduced tomorrow evening. While he didn't understand why he had to wait an extra day, His voice was insignificant, so he didn't dare ask. After all, the absolute number that came up on the dice had taught him that in Middle-earth, it's best to behave. So, he decided to take advantage of this time to explore the Woodland Kingdom, a legendary place you might never visit again. With this thought in mind, Ino opened his suitcase and took out his long-lost accordion. This time, he didn't even drink the precocious potion in his pocket. After donning elegant, custom-made robes, he pushed open the door and walked out of the room in his natural attire. He continued his stroll, nodding and smiling at every elf he met, without hesitation or formality. As he strolled casually, his accordion drifted behind him, slowly playing beautiful music. Before he knew it, he had left the underground palace and arrived at a clearing in the woods, akin to a square. In this vast clearing, many woodland elves had gathered. Their graceful voices sang vibrant ballads within the forest. Unlike the elves of the Rivendell and the Golden Forest, who sang heroic epics and legendary tales, the woodland elves preferred to celebrate the stars and the forest. Without interrupting, Ino stood quietly at the edge of the woods, listening. "Why don't you come over? I just followed you all the way here, and the music you played on the accordion is beautiful too." Ino turned and saw a girl, about his own height, speaking. Of course, he didn't underestimate the girl's height. After all, in terms of age, this underage elf before him could probably rival Nico, who possessed the Philosopher's Stone. Despite his thoughts, he immediately replied, "It's fine to just stand here and admire. There's no need to be there. After all, if I clench my hands, I have nothing, but if I open them, I have everything." As he spoke, Ino held out his palm, spreading his slender fingers in the air. "Ho ha ho ha, you're so interesting," the girl laughed happily. "My name is Doris, and welcome to the Woodland Kingdom. You can call me Ino. Although I know 2 magics, I'm a true bard." Hearing the answer, Doris said seriously, "Then, Ino, please begin your performance. If it's good, Doris will pay you. I have a lot of fun things hidden away." Looking at the pretty girl before him, Ino didn't think twice before waving his wand, and the accordion slowly began to play a new piece of music. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 80, Singing in the Woods. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the woods. In a clearing, Ino sat on the soft grass, his accordion floating in the air behind him. "My heart dwells at sea, born to seek a home, with the wind as its rudder and the waves as its companions. My will is not cold, my will is not cold." As the accordion played, Ino's eyes gradually closed, but the song continued softly, seeking a guide, a direction for life, unswayed by the storm. "Even if hope and patience desert me, as long as I see the way, life will lead me there." It was an exotic folk song, a song that touched the soul. Ino had adapted it and was singing it for the first time. After about a quarter of an hour, the accordion played its last note and slowly stopped. Though the accordion stopped playing, Ino never opened his eyes. Time slipped by. Perhaps you're right. This time the dwarves have truly been favored. They've escaped. Under tight defense, they've escaped the dungeon along the river. A familiar voice echoed again, and Ino opened his eyes. Thranduil, the woodland elf king, had appeared there without him noticing. "The rest is up to you. If you wish to stay here, stay. If you wish to go to Lonely Mountain, go. We don't mind one more movement." With a look of innate pride, Thranduil turned decisively and left. Gazing at the elf king's back, Ino silently thanked him. This was a happy ending, and it also confirmed his earlier divination. Feeling elated, he turned and glanced at the elven girl beside him. "Doris. I finished my song, but there are still many fascinating stories. Do you want to hear them?" The pages of the storybook flickered gently between his fingers, the words slowly flowing before his eyes. The bards, on their part, led their audiences into one wondrous world after another. Time slipped silently through the unfolding of story after story. It took away people's fatigue, leaving behind a heart full of joy and anticipation. On the 23rd day of arriving in the Woodland Kingdom, early in the morning, while still lying in bed, he heard Doris's slightly excited voice outside the room. "Ino. Get up quickly. My brother has sent me news. The dwarves who came with you have really killed the dragon Smog. I heard that the humans from Lake Town are helping them. Get up." "Wait a moment," Ino replied, waving his wand and making the robe hanging on the hanger float to his hand. After getting dressed, he opened the door and saw Doris's expression, begging for praise. The girl's delicate face was filled with her thoughts. Seeing this, Ino chuckled. Doris is truly amazing, even able to gather news from such a distant land. Of course. My brother has been Sentinel Captain since he came of age, making him a full 150 years old. Gazing at the proud young woman, Ino curiously asked, "That long ago? How old are you now?" This was a question he'd been wanting to ask since the moment he met Doris, but he'd never had the right opportunity. Now, this topic seemed like a perfect opportunity to satisfy his curiosity. "I'm 49, and I only have 1 year left to grow up," Doris blurted out without hesitation, as if she'd been waiting to be asked. However, as soon as she finished stating her age, her entire figure slumped. "According to the human solar year, I still have 20 years to grow up. 1 year for an elf equals 20 years. After some calculations, Ino realized that the elven girl before him was actually over 980 years old. As expected, time meant nothing to an elf. Having satisfied his curiosity, he turned his thoughts to the dwarves. From what Doris had said, it was clear the story had reached its finale. The slaying of the dragon Smog signaled the imminent arrival of the Battle of the Five Armies. "Doris, I might have to leave," Ino said, looking at the elf girl with a hint of regret. Having known her for some time, he knew she was quite lonely, otherwise, she wouldn't be so clingy. Thanks to the elves' immortality, even in the vast woodland kingdom, there weren't many friends of their own age. "You're leaving?" Doris was stunned, her eyes quickly misting over. "Will you come back? I've hidden so much I haven't shared with you yet." It seemed as if parting always carries a certain sadness. Looking at the girl before him, Ino hesitated for a moment. "I'm sorry. I don't know, but it's very likely I won't be back." Ultimately, he decided to speak the truth. While Gandalf had offered words of welcome, he knew that while Gandalf might be high-ranking, Middle-earth was far from being dictated by a single Maya, lesser god. Not to mention the supreme creator god Ollivander, Gandalf alone had 15 valor, primary gods, above him. Elsewhere, as Ino finished his words, the room fell into a brief silence. A long pause. "Go. All of you. Never come back, never play with me again, and I won't share my hidden treasures with you." Doris stood up angrily and dashed out of the room without a care in the world. Gazing at the girl's back, Ino opened his mouth, but nothing came out. But this kind of thing, there really was nothing he could do. Humans are not plants. 3 years of travel had seen him encounter countless similar situations, but they often ended in farewell. There might be a brief moment of sadness, but then it was forgotten. Sometimes, a visitor is just a visitor. It was the 33rd day in the Woodland Kingdom. Since that conversation 10 days ago, Ino hadn't seen Doris again. Watching the elves gather in groups, he couldn't do much more now. He could only do what he could in these final moments. In the underground palace, he thought of Legolas and gave the elven prince all his stock of white savory essence. After instructing him on how to use it, he mounted his broom and prepared to head for the Lonely Mountain. After their recent interactions, he no longer worried Thranduil would recklessly and foolishly engage the dwarves, as in the stories. Without further worries, all he had to do was hide on the city walls and kill a few orcs while he still had time, witnessing Middle-earth's famous Battle of the Five Armies. Wait a moment. Just as Ino mounted his broom and prepared to take off, an unfamiliar voice rang out. It belonged to an adult male elf warrior. "This is a gift from my sister. I don't agree with her, but as a brother, I can only do my best to fulfill her every request. A bracelet woven from red maple leaves. Thank Doris for me. And this half bottle of potion is for you. If you're hurt, sprinkle some on it." Ino took the bracelet and slipped it on his wrist. Then, with a light push of his feet, he shot into the air like an arrow from a bowstring in the blink of an eye. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please bookmark it. Please recommend it. Please vote for me. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Please vote for me. Chapter 81 Return and Coordinates, Miraculous Changes. Middle-earth, Autumn, 3rd Age 2941. Without its dragons, the Lonely Mountain, now a frail old man, emerged from another harsh winter, its waning spring rekindling with life. Of course, this fleeting vigor stemmed from the loss of countless lives. The sky was stained gray by the smoke of gunpowder, and sunlight filtered through the thick clouds, casting dappled shadows. The first to charge were the dwarves of the Iron Hills. Clad in heavy armor, mounted chariots, and armed with axes and spears, they charged unstoppably towards the orcs. Though small in stature, the dwarves, at this moment, possessed the imposing presence of giants of steel. Behind them stood the human forces of Lake Town. Though equipped with a multitude of weapons, this largely ragtag force stood steadfast, forming a second line of defense. On the southern side of the battlefield, 3,000 woodland elf archers were already in full formation. As the dwarfs charged, the elves drew their bows in unison, their arrows raining down like a barrage. With each volley, the orcs in the rear fell visibly, 1,000-man phalanx. This infuriated Azog, the orc leader, who stood halfway up the mountain. Although he considered the orcs worthless, the thought of an entire phalanx falling in a single volley was unacceptable. The orcs held a significant numerical advantage, but they could not withstand such attrition. With the sound of a new command horn, countless wolf riders, including wargs and even the trolls crouching in the rear, charged towards the elves. Meanwhile, giant eagles flew from the misty mountains. As trusted lieutenants of Manwë, chief of the Valor, the main gods, and descendants of the Maiar, the lesser gods, the giant eagles were extremely powerful. Not to mention the might of Thoronder, the Eagle King, whose power rivaled that of the dragon Smog. Even the ordinary giant eagles now circling the battlefield could knock over dozens or even hundreds of orcs with each flap of their wings, and their talons could easily rip through the skull of a giant troll. Similarly, the orcs' mortal enemy, the skin changer Bjarn, transformed into a giant bear and charged single-handedly against the charging wolf riders. Despite his solitary presence, he met with roars and wails everywhere he went. In just a few minutes, he had slashed through the thousands-strong wolf riders. But Bjarn, feeling it was not enough, turned and charged back. A hail of arrows, behemoths, chariots, and catapults, the entire battlefield was like a giant meat grinder, everyone in chaos. From beneath an archway on the eastern side of the empty lonely mountain, Ino quietly watched the battle below. This was the first time, in this life or before, that he had personally witnessed a cold weapon battle on such a scale. In such a situation, individual power was far too insignificant. Perhaps only the magnificent flames at the Paris cemetery could have had any effect here. He glanced down at the Elder Wand in his hand. A battle of this scale might not be something he could participate in right now. Although he longed to retreat and dart back, the urge to return returned. He had no choice but to take out his broom, mount it, and fly in the opposite direction. He flew southward. He didn't know how long it took until the surrounding scenery began to gradually change. Ino slowly lowered his broom. Unlike previous times, this time he didn't return directly to Wiltshire, but to a quiet lane. A path paved with blue bricks, about 3 or 4 feet wide and several dozen meters long. Yet, somehow, standing on this path, he felt a sense of peace, more at ease than at Hogwarts, or in the Slytherin dormitories, or even when he had been wandering with Teacher Hans. He had never felt this safe. Thick smoke filled both sides of the blue brick path, with only 2 intersections not far ahead. One was shrouded in a grey mist, while the other, at first glance, was familiar Wiltshire. But before he could make a choice, a burning sensation spread across his right wrist. The red maple leaf bracelet Doris had given him had vanished, transformed into countless fluttering leaves in the air, drifting towards the end of the path. In the blink of an eye, a secluded path of red maple leaves had formed, transforming the previous 2-way intersection into a standard 3-way intersection. With a strange sense, the moment Ino saw the red maple leaf, its message surfaced in his mind. This was the path to the kingdom of the woodland elves. But he also knew that neither the red maple leaf nor the mist was currently accessible. Only the path to Wiltshire was passable. Without hesitation, Ino grabbed his suitcase and headed towards the Wiltshire intersection. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please bookmark. Please recommend. Please vote for me. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Please vote for me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, Sorting Out the Harvest and the 3 Brooms. Wiltshire, a region in southwest England, is home to the beautiful Cronmore Hills and Salisbury Plain. Standing on the old streets of Wiltshire, The scenery was familiar, but Ino's mood was completely different. Although this journey had yielded no obvious rewards, not even a single copper, and had been spent in a passive and tense atmosphere, the hidden rewards were undeniably significant. Simply having a new destination to choose from was the greatest reward. For the past 3 years, he had been forced to keep moving forward, completely unsure of what lay ahead. Sometimes, he wondered if the abyss lay ahead, he would have had no choice but to forge ahead. Now, with the added option of a woodland elf kingdom, his journey would no longer be forced, but a matter of his own choosing. The next benefit was time, and time was often the most scarce resource for a young wizard. Although this trip to Middle-earth lasted less than 2 months, perhaps this was also due to the context of the story. But it's undeniable that having one more option can buy him a few months, even half a year, of free time, free and without cost. If you think about it, the next 100 years of Middle-earth will be a blank period in the story. Quietly staying in the Woodland Kingdom, even if he did nothing but read a book and sing a song, he was confident that he would possess the magical powers of an adult wizard by his 3rd year. Of course, not to mention that mysterious-looking blue brick path, the miraculous transformation within himself was crucial. If it weren't for the statute of secrecy, Ino would have wanted to test it right now. Deep down, he had a feeling that he could access that blue brick path at any time. The only uncertainty now was the speed of time. If everything were ideal, there would be no need for life-saving dice or even a traceless extension box. An absolutely safe shelter would be his greatest trump card. Even if he faced Voldemort head-on, even if he provoked the entire wizarding world, at least he wouldn't have to worry about his own safety. A quiet street in Wiltshire. Ino, suitcase in his left hand, wand drawn in his right, stood quietly at the intersection without casting any magic. Now he had to wait for a means of transport back to London. The night bus was undoubtedly the most cost-effective option, both in terms of speed and price. Wiltshire was a full 132 kilometers away from London. If he really had to take a Muggle taxi, he would have to empty all the pounds in his pocket. Even if you had rented the little guy to Hermione for 7 years before the summer vacation in exchange for £50 of rent, it was still far from enough to cover the cost of a taxi. Thinking of the fact that Hermione had meticulously written a lease contract, he couldn't help but curl his lips. Squeak. Suddenly, a sharp brake sound was heard. A 3-decker bus seemed to emerge from thin air, and with a sharp brake sound, it stopped in front of Ino. On the windshield of the car was a striking sign written in gold letters, Night Bus. Anytime, just stand by the road and raise your wand, and the night bus will appear, taking you anywhere you want to go. Of course. We don't go to the sea. The door opened, and a young wizard with prominent ears and a face covered in acne, dressed in a purple uniform, recited the contents of the brochure in a rhythmic manner. Hogsmeade. The 3 broomsticks, Ino said, giving the address and heading for the door. Okay, 6 sickles. The conductor at the bus door quickly quoted the price, then fiddled with the old-fashioned ticket machine on his chest. Here's your ticket. Of course, if you add 3 sickles, you get a chocolate treat. Add 4, never mind, the journey is too short to use a toothbrush. By the way, my name is Stan Shunpike, and I'll be at your service throughout this trip. Faced with this bundled offer, Ino decisively shook his head and refused. Sorry. I don't need it. Also, I'm very tired. Can I rest for a while? Okay, have a nice trip again. The conductor shrugged nonchalantly, then turned to the driver's seat. Let's go. Hogsmeade, outside the 3 broomsticks. Ino sat on a bed with copper pillars and, while the conductor was speaking, neatly tied himself to it. Even with the almost binding method, the immense inertia of the night bus's start nearly knocked him to the ground. But after a brief shock, he gradually acclimated to the high-speed driving mode. It's true that some people enjoy fast driving, and perhaps there's a reason for that. The adrenaline rush and thrill of such high speeds is also a kind of enjoyment. Night bus. Ino half-leaned on the bed, took a deep breath of the fresh air, and felt a unique tranquility and peace of the English countryside. He also decided that he wouldn't go anywhere else this summer, staying in Hogsmeade. Besides giving himself some quiet time, he also needed to think about his future. Magic, or rather, the magic in Harry Potter's stories, is never a simple trick, though many people treat it as such. But he was always clear that the world he now inhabited was a world on par with Narnia and the Lord of the Rings. If it were a story, it would undoubtedly be a tale of epic proportions. Time slipped slowly. Despite the night bus's constant violations and speeding, it took less than 10 minutes to cover the entire distance from Wiltshire to Hogsmeade. Ino stepped off the bus, saw the 3 broomsticks sign, and without a second thought, pushed the door open. After a brief chat with Madame Rosmerta, he returned to his old room. The familiar furnishings gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Of course, there were some differences. For example, the Christmas tree and other decorations that once stood in the corner were now replaced with blue bellflowers, a fitting summertime sight. Ordinary days flowed like a steady stream, neither hurried nor slow. Yet, they silently filled the hourglass of time. Likewise, time flowed slowly in the quiet, like a stream gently caressing gravel, all soundless and imperceptible. Ino stayed the 3 broomsticks for a full week, temporarily declining Madame Rosmerta's invitation to perform in residence, citing summer homework as an excuse. This wasn't an excuse. On his 3rd day, he received a package from Professor McGonagall. It contained the latest issue of Transfiguration Today and excerpts from recent Best Newcomer essays. Faced with these stark instructions, he could only temporarily put everything else on hold and prepare a draft before school started, sending it to Professor McGonagall for review. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 83 Shelter in Ice Sculpture. 3 brooms, in the guest room. A messy table was covered with discarded parchment. Many of the spreads bore only a single sentence, leaving vast expanses of blank space covered in scribbled cartoons. In stark contrast, the room was immaculate, as if regularly cleaned with household magic. The floor and bed were both meticulously tidy, almost to the point of being excessively neat. The only surprising thing was that, aside from the cluttered desk, there were virtually no personal belongings. Similarly, no one was in the room. A small, blue brick path, 3 or 4 feet wide and over 100 feet long, it felt like the frigid South Pole. The bricks and the curbs were now covered not only with snow but also with miniature ice sculptures, each a dozen centimeters tall. These sculptures were in a myriad of shapes: knights, unicorns, dragons, anacondas, and even delicate whomping willows. At the end of the path, Ino sat on the soft snow, head bowed, still toiling away. Not far in front of him stood a larger whomping willow, estimated to be 2 or 3 meters tall and as thick as a bucket. Its trunk was crystal clear. While this whomping willow looked identical to the previous miniature versions, a closer look revealed a greater vitality and liveliness. Judging solely by its form and ignoring its color, this whomping willow resembled the one planted outside Hogwarts Castle, aside from its smaller size. A moment later, a vivid ice sculpture of a rabbit appeared and sprinted towards the whomping willow in the distance. Bang! There was a loud bang. The rabbit shattered into a blanket of ice as it approached the whomping willow. The whomping willow, on the other hand, gently swayed its branches, seemingly unaffected. Beautiful! Ino exclaimed in satisfaction at his handiwork. Even the recent anguish over his inability to write a transfiguration paper briefly dissipated. Speaking of transfiguration papers, after seeing the recent award-winning papers, he realized that Professor McGonagall's expectations were a bit too high. Not to mention the award-winning author's profound expertise and their extensive knowledge of transfiguration, even the fundamental application of transfiguration itself was beyond his reach. After days of writing papers, he barely produced a single serious word, while his cartoon illustrations became increasingly sophisticated. Ino had no choice but to temporarily forego the unattainable Best New Artist award. He had devoted considerable time and energy to solidifying his transfiguration foundation. While it didn't reach the standards of a prize winner, the results were gratifying. And the whomping willow before him was his achievement. While ice arrows had previously been able to change form, even forming exquisite lilies, inanimate objects were still inanimate. Through this period of accumulation, he had developed a new form of magic, using ice arrows as a medium in conjunction with transfiguration. While transfiguration could transform living creatures, any transformed creature would instantly return to its original form if destroyed. However, ice was different. In a blizzard, even if a transformed living creature was damaged, it would absorb the surrounding ice and snow and restore itself, achieving a certain sense of immortality. Imagine a dark wizard trapped in a forest of whomping willows, ice and snow drifting from the sky. Under the lashing of countless vines, not to mention the shield charm, even a giant dragon would be bound there. Of course, This requires a prerequisite, weather and environment. Without sufficient ice and snow, an ice sculpture unable to recover from the dragon's flames wouldn't last long. A few minutes later, Ino slowly stood up and waved his elder wand. The over 2-meter-tall, lushly branched whomping willow instantly transformed into an Amazonian anaconda nearly 20 feet long and as thick as a bowl. Its icy blue trunk crouched and slithered along the ground. Its cold, empty eyes, though refusing any aggressive gesture, still made the giant python look terrifying. His ability to transform such large creatures wasn't due to his exceptional transfiguration skills. The real reason lay in the ubiquitous ice and snow covering the path, and his natural affinity and mastery over it. A simple example, a young wizard might easily transform an apple into a pear, but perhaps only Professor McGonagall could transform a matchstick into a cabinet. After all, transforming equal volumes is the easiest. Ino looked at the anaconda at his feet and noticed that it was slowly growing in size as it walked along the snow-covered path. While the increase wasn't noticeable, it was certainly significant. Suddenly, as if sensing something, Ino vanished, leaving the anaconda alone, snaking along the snow-covered brick path. Hogsmeade, at the Three Broomsticks entrance. Pansy entered, clutching a stack of old parchment scrolls. Her purpose for this trip was to fulfill a promise she'd made on the train, a request she'd made to her parents after dinner yesterday. She'd expected a lot of negotiation, but after reviewing Ino's final report and learning about the entire school year, her father readily agreed to sell the Parkinson family's Hogsmeade estate. He even offered a generous discount. After confirming the situation with Malfoy, Pansy rushed to the Three Broomsticks. Following the guidance of the owner, Madame Rosmerta, she arrived at a corner room on the 3rd floor. Pansy felt a little reserved outside the room. After all, traditional English values for a lady's modesty forbade her from entering a gentleman's room alone. But she couldn't care less now, as her father's instructions after dinner resurfaced in her mind. Once you've made a decision, act quickly. Procrastination will only allow others to do what you want to do for you. Never underestimate the wisdom of others. What you can see, others can see too. Draco is better at this than you. Knock. Knock. Pansy knocked on the door. On the other side. As Ino observed the anaconda's transformation, he felt a knock on the door. Without hesitation, he vanished down the blue brick path with a single thought. He grew increasingly satisfied with this simple shelter. Although time flowed at a normal rate, unlike in a story where no matter how much time had passed, it seemed like only a moment outside the story, this ability to move at will and sense the surroundings more than made up for any shortcomings. Or rather, any shortcomings, combined with these two factors, seemed insignificant. After all, absolute safety was paramount. He even considered that, if he had enough supplies, he could live here forever. But despite these thoughts, Ino opened the door immediately after hearing it. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 84, Hogsmeade Properties. Slowly opening the door, Pansy's face, a hint of nervousness, came into view. Upon closer inspection, Ino noticed something different. Pansy seemed to be wearing light makeup today. Her face, once slightly thin and stern, now seemed softer and fuller. Ms. Parkinson? What are you doing? He stood at the doorway, not immediately inviting her in. Perhaps this wasn't a big deal in France, but in England, etiquette and subtlety were essential, no matter the occasion. Good morning, Mr. Swinburne. Pansy nodded slightly, a subtle gesture that perfectly conveyed friendliness and respect. It seemed she had practiced this many times, her manners impeccable. Remember what happened on the train? I've brought some property deeds. You can choose the one you like. Rest assured, my parents have approved of all of this. As if fearing misunderstanding, Pansy's voice held a hint of urgency, emphasizing the words parents' approval. Thank you very much, Miss Parkinson. Ino bowed slightly. He had originally thought Pansy's words on the train were just a passing thought, but who could have imagined she'd taken them so seriously, showing up 3 days later with a stack of property deeds. If Pansy hesitated for a moment, then whispered, if it's okay, I'd like you to call me Pansy. Okay. Pansy, you can call me Ino, too. Though her voice was a little quiet, it reached Ino's ears clearly. Looking at the somewhat reserved girl before him, He realized once again that oftentimes, one simply shouldn't be misled by tales. A living being, a living person, is always complex and multifaceted, never monotonous and stereotyped. The characters portrayed in stories, whether in character or conduct, may simply be one-sided definitions of the storytellers. So, shall we go downstairs to the lobby? Ino suggested, glancing at the room behind him. Yes, Pansy replied softly, her tone barely discernible. The morning's 3 brooms still felt somewhat chilly. He and Pansy slowly descended the stairs. The lobby was sparsely populated. Under Madame Rosmerta's amused gaze, Ino chose a table near the corner. There was no way around it. Madame Rosmerta's curious, probing, and profound look was truly irritating, like the expression of a parent discovering their child's premature romance. A relatively secluded corner perfectly avoided the gaze of any nosy observers. Please take a seat. Honestly, I can't wait, Ino said half-jokingly. Owning a property of his own seemed etched deep within his soul. Well, take a look then. There are 6 shops and 12 residences, all designed to your standards, priced around 10,000 galleons. The shops might be a bit more expensive, but the difference won't be too significant. Pansy placed the parchment scrolls she was holding on the table, not even mentioning any discounts. Looking at the pile of properties on the table, Ino didn't immediately reach out. Shops for 10,000? You must be kidding. He wasn't a complete novice. While Hogsmeade might not be as prosperous as Diagon Alley, it wasn't so cheap. Perhaps pure-blood girls had a knack for reading people's expressions. Seeing her items on the table untouched, Pansy explained, the prices at the shops are higher, but my parents agreed to let you pay 10,000 galleons up front, and you can make up the difference later. Thank them for my generosity. After understanding the reason, Ino examined the scrolls on the table. Although he had already decided not to touch the shops, the prices of the 12 residences still made him a little embarrassed. It was simply because they were too cheap. The discounts were almost as steep as those at London supermarkets nearing their expiration dates. At the end of each month, those supermarkets would sell off food items nearing their expiration dates, and the prices were truly shockingly low. Despite comparing himself, Ino quietly examined the scrolls. Pansy politely sat by his side, not interrupting him. About a quarter of an hour passed. Pansy, actually, there's really no need for this. Maybe I don't have enough money, but I'll make up the difference over time. After some thought, Ino decided to be honest. Everyone likes cheap goods, but favors owed aren't so easy to repay. You choose first, and I'll tell you the real price later. As if anticipating this situation, Pansy blurted out without a second thought. Okay. Then these 3. If possible, I'd like to see them. Ino picked up the parchment scrolls and selected 3. They were all standard residential properties, 2 apartment-like units and 1 single-family house. Each had its pros and cons, but the only thing they had in common was their size and location, all in remote areas of Hogsmeade, and all occupied very small plots. Of course, these disadvantages might be difficult for others to accept, but he was content with them. The remoteness was good, quiet and undisturbed. As for the size, honestly, he had his own plans. The Ministry of Magic's regulations regarding the extension charm were up to those who like to abide by them. The British Ministry of Magic will be overwhelmed for the next few years anyway, so as long as they don't make a big fuss, no one will keep an eye on them. Leaving the 3 broomsticks. Deep in Hogsmeade, away from the commercial streets. Led by Pansy, Ino finally arrived at the first property after passing through several quiet alleys. From afar, the 2-story building stood quietly at the end of the alley, seemingly isolated from the world. While some of the surrounding houses were old and dilapidated, this one remained immaculately clean and tidy. Speaking of which, we have to mention the Ministry of Magic's deception. He had previously researched some information in the Hogwarts library and discovered that the Ministry of Magic's regulations regarding wizarding residences were truly bizarre. Aside from wizarding hotspots like Diagon Alley or Hogsmeade, anywhere else in the British Isles, a permit signed by the Director of Law Enforcement was all that was needed to build a house. Of course, if muggles discovered the building, the wizard would be held responsible, and the specific matter would be handled by the Accident and Disaster Department. Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, however, are different. They have their own unique system. No one is allowed to build houses here without permission, even the Ministry of Magic doesn't have such authority. This means that despite Hogsmeade's abundance of vacant properties, demand for housing still outstrips supply. Of course, pure blood values may also play a role here. After all, many old pure-blood families would rather see their houses fall into disrepair than allow what they call mudbloods to live there. Therefore, in Hogsmeade, renting out properties is even rarer, let alone selling them. This perfectly embodies the British Empire's approach. They'd rather let their meat rot than give anyone a chance to share. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add my book to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add my book to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 85 Plans for the second academic year. As they walked forward, the house at the end of the alley became clearer. It was a small, two-story building, modest in size, yet exuding a touch of Victorian elegance and grandeur. Constructed entirely of dark marble, the building exuded a quiet, ancient charm, weathered by time. Roses and ivy intertwined along the outer stone walls, adding a touch of mystery and vitality to the building. Excellent. Truly. Ino couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, looking at the house before him. Then he turned to look at Pansy behind him. This one's the one. I love it. I won't bother looking at the other two. Now, can you tell me the real price? Haha, it's actually not that expensive, Pansy chuckled, unfolding a piece of parchment and pointing to a section of text. Look, a house similar to this one only sold for 15,000 galleons. A mere 15,000. Ino stared at the parchment scroll in front of him, speechless. Before enrolling, he'd considered himself wealthy, possessing a bag of gold coins. But now it seemed, among these pure-blood families, he was only wealthier than the Wheelies. I can only pay 9,000 galleons up front. I'll raise the rest as quickly as possible, and probably, before I graduate, I'll pay back the entire balance, Ino said apologetically. Truthfully, if possible, he really didn't want to be in debt. But the house before him really suited his taste. Both the setting and the layout perfectly suited the style of a wizard's residence, mysterious, solemn, and imbued with a sense of age. Nearing noon, Ino returned alone to the Three Broomsticks. After paying a full 61.2-ounce gold coins, he successfully received a property sale and purchase agreement stamped and signed by the Ministry of Magic. By then, the bag of gold coins old John had given him was almost gone. Pushing open the door of the Three Broomsticks, he was greeted by Madame Rosmerta's half-smile. Did you send your girlfriend home? Let me guess, did you go to Madame Puddifoot's tea shop? Pansy isn't my girlfriend. She's my creditor, Ino said grumpily. He didn't know if all Hogwarts students were like this, but Madame Rosmerta was insanely curious. Creditor. She dropped her usual playful wit and asked seriously, did anything happen? Nothing much, I just bought a house in Hogsmeade, Ino said with a smile, his voice light and slightly reserved. He hadn't hidden the purchase, and he couldn't have. After all, Hogsmeade was so small, barely a small town at best, and everyone knew everything. My Merlin. When I first met you, you ran out and bought an owl. And now, not long after, you're out buying a house. Next time, you're not going to buy my bar, are you? Seeing Madame Rosmerta's slightly exaggerated expression, Ino said half-jokingly, buy a bar? I'd love to, but I'm seriously in debt now. I've been thinking about taking a part-time job as a storyteller here. Of course, I'll give you 30% of the tips as a venue fee. Put away those nuts, Madame Rosmerta said, glancing wordlessly at the empty lobby. You expect to make money here? Do you think every day is Christmas? That's true. After realizing it, Ino was a little bewildered. After all, Hogsmeade is a residential area, not a commercial street. Its biggest economic activity is probably every weekend, when Hogwarts students from the third year and above come here to spend money. Before dusk, after paying for his accommodations, Ino returned to the alleyway he'd been in that morning, carrying his suitcase. He gazed at the small building, steeped in age. Unlike his last observation from afar, he headed straight for the front door. Ahem. Ahem. Pushing it open, a choking smell of dust filled the room. A thick layer of dust covered the floor, mottled grass, a shrew in the corner. How hasty. He muttered to himself. When he'd viewed the house that morning, he'd been lured by the building's exterior. Who could have imagined it would be so decayed inside? Sweep clean. Clean it up. Keep it safe. Seeing this, He immediately drew his wand and cast 3 household cleaning spells. After waiting at the door for a long moment, he finally entered, suitcase in hand. The spell's effects were immediate. Seeing the old furniture in the spotless room, Ino breathed a sigh of relief, and a sense of belonging washed over him. The house was 2 stories, each floor measuring only about 60 or 70 square meters. The downstairs housed the living room and a combined kitchen and dining room. The second floor housed an open-plan bedroom, a walnut double bed nestled in the center, and a large desk flanked by a window on the other side. Although the second floor's furnishings were unusually simple, he didn't mind. A bit more space was actually better, making it easier to add to the space later. Time, sometimes, is like a professional seeker on a brand new broom, always catching the hidden golden snitch before anyone realizes. The 2-month summer vacation had slipped by in the blink of an eye. During this time, Ino spent most of his time in his little room. Besides practicing magic, he spent most of his daytime hours in the pine forest behind Hogsmeade, felling dead pine trees to craft furniture, coffee tables, sofas, desks and chairs, bookshelves, and more. With the help of cutting and gluing charms, the furniture-making process couldn't be simpler. Not only was there no effort involved, but it felt like the joy of stacking blocks. On the second floor, at the desk, the Hogwarts owl delivered the second-year checklist as promised. Looking at the string of book titles on the parchment, it was obvious that the renowned novelist Lockhart had finally become the defense against the dark arts professor. I really don't know what he was thinking, eh? Ino sighed softly, setting down the parchment. Compared to the elusive headmaster, he trusted Professor McGonagall more. Whether it was his understanding of the story or the recent correspondence, he had come to realize that Professor McGonagall's motivation for everything she did was always for the young wizards in the castle. If Professor McGonagall were headmaster, she would never allow someone like Lockhart to teach at the school. Because of this, he was considering whether to tell Professor McGonagall about the Chamber of Secrets at the right time to avoid further panic in the second half of the semester. As for preventing the diary from appearing, sorry. He wasn't that great, or perhaps he didn't have the ability to deal with a story that had changed its trajectory. Humans are complex creatures, and the human heart is always complex and ever-changing. With every bridge we cross, every meal we eat, every person we meet, our perspectives change. After experiencing Middle-earth, while Ino no longer blindly believes in storylines, he's also not foolishly trying to be a hero. Similarly, just as the double-slit experiment revealed the wave-particle duality of light molecules, perhaps when he immerses himself in the story, viewing it from a first-person perspective, the story has actually changed. However, these changes are currently limited. If the notebook were truly prevented from entering Hogwarts, Dumbledore would remain completely unaware of the Horcruxes. This would drastically alter the course of the story. Therefore, the best option is to allow the notebook to enter and then secretly inform Professor McGonagall. As for the opportunity and excuse, Ino has already thought of it. In the wizarding world, what could be more magical than divination? He just needs to buy a crystal ball before school starts and then put on a show. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 86: A Sudden Kiss. Diagon Alley, London. Although Diagon Alley was always bustling with activity before the start of school each year, the commotion today seemed even greater than in previous years, as if the entire magical world of England had gathered together. The entire street seemed poised to erupt in excitement. So, you actually secretly bought a house in Hogsmeade during the summer vacation. Hermione's eyes widened, regret written all over her face. She'd only been in France with her parents for a month, and she'd missed so much. Ino smiled casually. Yet, what else can I do? I don't have a stable place to live in London, and I can't just live at the Three Broomsticks forever. He turned and quietly examined Hermione. After not seeing her for the summer, Hermione seemed to have grown taller, and her signature front teeth seemed trimmed, looking even more neat and lovely. The girl before him was no longer the slightly youthful Miss Bunny standing at the elementary school gate. Hermione could feel Ino's gaze on her from time to time, and she couldn't help but feel a little shy. But this feeling of being noticed also gave her a strange sense of joy. By the way, Ino, have you seen the list from Hogwarts? Hermione asked, a hint of excitement in her voice, a sudden memory in her voice. You won't believe it, Gilderoy Lockhart will be our defense against the dark arts professor this year. Hermione's eyes sparkled, as if she had discovered something truly remarkable. Lockhart? He's certainly a talent for writing novels, Ino said flatly. He had once glanced briefly at Lockhart's novels at Madame Rosmerta's. Honestly, he had a knack for capturing the reader's attention, both in plot and pacing. Don't you like him? Hermione asked softly. There was a hint of tentativeness in his words, and she could tell Ino didn't seem to like Lockhart. Not that I don't like him. In a way, Lockhart is, Ino paused mid-sentence, his gaze drawn to a scene not far away. Following his gaze, he saw Lucius and Arthur tussling in front of Flourish and Blots. From the looks of it, the fight seemed to have ended in a draw. Lucius and Arthur both had visible scratches on their faces, and their robes were also covered in footprints, demonstrating the intensity of the confrontation. This scene also made him sigh inwardly. In fact, the fight between Lucius and Arthur was, in a way, reminiscent of the rivalry between Malfoy and Harry. This fateful rivalry seemed predestined. Ino turned to Hermione with an apologetic look. Sorry, Hermione. I have to go say hello. It's okay, I'll wait here. Hermione nodded slightly. She also noticed Ron in the crowd, but her mind told her that going there now would only add to the conflict. As she moved forward, Ino squeezed into the first scene. Unlike the original story, this time, only Lucius was present, without Draco. Of course, these were all minor matters. Watching the two fighting, Ino didn't rush in rashly. Instead, she calmly surveyed her surroundings. Finally, among the debris on the floor, Tom's vintage notebook was found. It seemed Lucius had accidentally dropped it during the fight. He was so sure because the notebook gave him the feeling of facing a giant spider in the Mirkwood, an evil with the power of corrosion and bewitchment, although the bewitchment was very faint. Now that he had confirmed the notebook, all that remained was to stop the fight. Unbeknownst to him, a thin layer of frost had quietly formed on the ground where the two men were wrestling. Ouch! Help me! Arthur and Lucius, who were wrestling with each other, slipped at the same time and fell to the ground. However, as luck would have it, after falling, their eyes met and their lips touched. Merlin. Arthur cheated on me. He even had the audacity to kiss someone in front of Mom. Won't that mean we'll have another Slytherin brother? That's perfect for replacing Ron. I don't like him anyway. George and Fred, standing nearby, were constantly bantering, but their eyes widened, afraid to miss a moment of excitement. You two, go separate them. Isn't this embarrassing enough? Molly looked up and saw a crowd of onlookers had gathered around them. Many were even clapping and whistling. Meanwhile, Ino quietly approached, dispelling the spell while pulling Lucius up. Good day, Uncle Lucius. He simply greeted, not mentioning anything about the fight. After all, this was a matter of a man's pride. I'm sorry to have made a fool of myself. Lucius looked up, realizing it was Ino helping him up, and forced a forced smile. I think you should go back. Whatever's going on, we'll talk about it later. Ino made a deliberate gesture to look around. As expected, Lucius also noticed the crowd around him. Ino, you're right. I have to leave. Lucius stood up, his eyes flickering a few times, then looked at the Weasley children nearby. Hurry, gather your things. They're scattered all over the floor. This is the best your great father could give you. With that, Lucius quickly squeezed out of the crowd. As the person in question left, the crowd gradually dispersed, and two columns quietly and orderly formed in front of Flourish and Blots. After all, the highlight was over, and they hadn't come here just to watch the fun. Queuing for Lockhart's autograph was the more important thing. Sir? Can you move aside? You accidentally stepped on my things. A soft voice reached his ears, and Ino couldn't help but turn around. Before him was a young girl with a youthful face and bright red hair. The girl clutched the hem of her dress tightly in her small hands, staring timidly at the ground. There lay several blank sheets of parchment, scattered like fallen autumn leaves. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Ino knelt down and picked up the parchments one by one. As he did so, a figure emerged in his mind, the timid, tearful little girl from the orphanage. The image of the little girl gradually overlapped with the image of Ginny before him. In a split second, or perhaps even less, Ino opened his suitcase and, in Muggle mode, took out a brand new set of stationery. It was Winrendra's latest set, an automatic quill pen, 2 large capacity ink bottles, and 3 softcover notebooks. I really like that notebook on the ground, it's very retro. So, can I trade it with you? Since they were all going to report it to Professor McGonagall, he might as well do it. Dumbledore would undoubtedly see it. Go away. Stay away from my sister. An angry voice rang out. Looking at Ron's furious face, Ino suppressed his temper and explained, I just accidentally stepped on this lady's parchment, so I'm going to make amends. Our family doesn't want your things, Ginny, let's go. Ron picked up the vintage notebook on the ground. Then he grabbed Ginny's arm and turned away without a word, not even picking up the scattered parchment on the ground. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 87 The Cruel Reality. At the entrance of the bustling Flourish and Blott's bookstore, Ino watched Ginny's back as she walked away, and a trace of complexity emerged in his heart. Shaking his head helplessly, he squatted down again and sorted out the parchment on the ground. Although the person had left, the things under his feet could not be left there unattended. She is very beautiful, isn't she? Hermione's voice sounded, and her eyes followed Ino's sight to see Ginny's back. Hermione had just witnessed everything here, especially when Ino opened the box and took out the stationery set. She had an indescribable feeling, inexplicably unhappy. Beautiful. Ino was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, she is just a little old, at most she is cute like a girl next door. Yet, that's right. Like a little sister. Hermione nodded heavily, with a hint of joy in her tone. Hermione, do you think stupidity is truly innate? Although she wasn't sure why Ino asked, Hermione answered seriously, I don't think so. Very few people are born stupid. I feel most are shaped by their environment, whether it's their personality or their stupidity. So stupidity is a moral flaw. Ino slowly stood up after tidying up the scattered parchment. Stupid people can't be truly kind, because they can't tell right from wrong, and act solely on emotion. So stupidity itself is an irredeemable evil. Suddenly, Ino felt a little bored. Arguing with stupid people would only make him stupider too. Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. Do you still want to buy books? You might still be in time to queue up now. Hearing this, Hermione glanced at the bustling Flourish and Blots with an embarrassed look on her face. Let's buy it in a few days. There's still 2 weeks until school starts. She glanced at the suitcase beside her and asked casually, did you buy that stationery set in Hogsmeade? I haven't even seen it in Diagon Alley. Stationery. Ino turned suddenly, and once again, that familiar body language was present. Hermione's toes tapped the ground. Hermione wore a pair of pristine white sandals, 2 black straps that wrapped around her arch, fitting snugly around her ankle before meeting at the top of her foot in a delicate bow. Yet, these beautiful shoes, inadvertently, kicked a pebble on the side of the road. So, do you want to go to Hogsmeade? I'll take you on the wizarding bus. It'll only take a quarter of an hour. Tuesday, September 1st, 1992. A gentle breeze. The Hogwarts Express departed from London King's Cross Station as scheduled. In a compartment at the back of the train, Ino sat quietly in his seat, his head resting gently against the window, watching the pastoral scenery pass by. Across from him, Pansy was regaling Daphne with interesting stories from her summer vacation. Hearing the occasional chuckles of laughter from across the way, Ino too drifted into fleeting memories. For the rest of the summer, apart from occasionally taking Hermione for a stroll around Hogsmeade, he seemed to be stuck in a vicious cycle of revising papers, mailing letters, revising papers, mailing letters. Of course, a chance encounter had also revealed that Professor McGonagall actually lived in Hogsmeade, not far from her building. Despite knowing her address, without an invitation, they could only communicate via owl. Fortunately, on the last day of school, Professor McGonagall mercifully refused to return the paper, instead writing that she would send it to the editorial office of Transfiguration today. Bang! The compartment door was flung open from the outside. Something's happened. Ho ha ho ha. Draco walked in and burst into laughter. If you don't want to talk, go out and laugh. Can't you see we're chatting? Pansy looked at Draco with displeasure. She was clearly chatting happily, almost getting to the juicy part, when someone ruthlessly interrupted her. I'm telling you. Many people on the train saw it. Potter and his Weasley henchmen drove a flying muggle car right over our heads. Draco said, gesturing with his hands, as if trying to describe the shape of the car more realistically. So they're done. Daphne said thoughtfully. If they could be seen on the train, I'm sure a lot of muggles would have seen it too. Yes. They're done. As if tickled, Draco's whole body lit up. Ino, who had been listening quietly to the conversation, asked in confusion, "Why are you saying it's over? Even if muggles see it, isn't there the accident and disaster department?" "Let me tell you." Daphne interrupted Pansy before she could say anything. Ever since she boarded the train, she had been listening to Pansy's story, and she didn't want to interrupt. Now she finally had the chance. Mr. Swinburne, you probably don't know much about the Ministry of Magic. My brother works in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. In just one summer vacation, they arrested 176 wizards who violated the statute of secrecy. At this point, Daphne adopted an exaggerated tone. Of those, 120 were for minor offenses and were only fined under 100 galleons. But the remaining 56 were for more serious offenses and were fined over 100 galleons, imprisoned in Azkaban for a month, or both. The worst-case scenario was a Ravenclaw girl who just graduated this year. She was fined both. It's said that it alarmed Professor Flitwick. It seems that she transformed a bouquet of flowers in front of her mother's grave, and a lot of people accidentally saw it. Then those people started spreading rumors about demons and witches. Hearing this, Ino no longer paid attention to Daphne, who was beaming with joy. His entire mind was now focused on the statute of secrecy. A girl who had just turned 17, facing Azkaban for conjuring a bouquet of flowers and being seen? While Professor Flitwick's intervention might not guarantee this, the sentence alone was absurd. Perhaps, all the storylines were embellished, leading him to never consider anything beyond the story itself. In the original story, after the flying car incident, Arthur seemingly only faced suspension and investigation, not even a fine. Harry and Ron, the two involved, only had their academic credits deducted. Ron, worse off, received an extra howler. And nothing happened after that, as if everything was over, bygones be bygones. But today, after hearing Daphne's description, it seemed as if the harsh reality hidden beneath the fairy tale of the magical world had truly been revealed. In the future, if the Harry Potter story ended and everything returned to normal, without the filter of the story, would that also mark the beginning of suffering? For the first time, Ino pondered the future, having previously focused on the storyline. But it was clear that this wasn't some fantasy world on the road, where he could just leave without a care in the world once the story was over. Horizontal ellipsis. Time passed quietly, and the voices in the cubicle became quieter and quieter, until... "Ino, are you okay?" Draco asked with some concern. Hearing this, Ino's thoughts were pulled back to the present. When he came to his senses, he saw three puzzled faces in the cubicle, looking at Draco, Pansy and Daphne. "I'm fine. It's just that I was wondering, do we really need to be so scared? What are we learning magic for? We live like rats in the sewer, or even worse than rats. A new book is released, a new journey begins, and I would like to thank all the big guys for their support. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote." Chapter 88, Thoughts and the Start of School. Inside the train compartment, Ino instinctively spoke his true thoughts. But he regretted it the moment he finished speaking, especially after seeing the expressions of Draco and the others. Haha, I was just saying it. After all, our mission right now is to study hard. By the way, I heard Lockhart was on this train too. Ino tried to change the subject, but he forgot the precociousness of purebloods and the shrewdness of Slytherins. "I don't care about Lockhart," Pansy said with disdain at the mention of Lockhart. "I just want to know what's on your mind, Mr. Ino Swinburne." "Right." Daphne agreed. Draco nodded in agreement. "I'm curious too. Why do you suddenly feel a little sorry for us, but you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong?" Seeing the three people's expressions, who seemed determined to get to the bottom of things, Ino rubbed his brow helplessly. "It's really hard to explain. How about this? After school starts, when we have some free time, we can have a story time and talk it over." Faced with these three curious children, he could only resort to procrastination. After school started, time would pass, and the matter would eventually fade away. "All right, we'll talk about it then," Draco readily agreed. Seeing Draco's transformation, Pansy and Daphne exchanged a glance, then stopped questioning and instead began discussing the flying car. Back to the subject, Draco was the most excited. "Really? The wheel eyes are finished?" They're going to get a skin in the rough this time, even though they're already broke. Daphne glanced at someone who was getting overly excited and immediately poured cold water on him. Not necessarily. Have you forgotten old Weasley's job? Could he have left a secret door for himself? Okay. You're right. Draco lowered his head in frustration. Ino watched the whole interaction, a smile playing on his lips. In that moment, he lamented how fate could be so strange. Sometimes, when Draco got angry, he could really snap at everyone. But with Daphne, his future wife's sister, he was always very tolerant. After all, he'd never seen Draco contradict Daphne before. Meanwhile, Pansy, though also engaged in conversation, discerned the slight curl in Ino's lips. Did you think of anything happy? I was thinking about fate, Ino replied truthfully. There was nothing to hide, it was perfectly normal for wizards to ponder fate. For example. Pansy pressed. For example. Ino smiled. Unlike the previous pointed topics, this one was a much safer one. For example, unlike this year, I can stay in the library until curfew, or I can explore every corner of the castle alone in the early mornings and evenings. The train sailed through the wilderness of the Scottish Highlands. Time slipped by unnoticed as they chatted, and evening approached. Perhaps swayed by the experience of starvation last year, both Pansy and Daphne had meticulously prepared food this time. Looking at the two deliciously presented boxes, Ino and Draco didn't hesitate to respond to the sincere invitation. After finishing his last Wellington sandwich, Ino used a cleaning spell to sweep the mess off the lunchbox and the tabletop. It's almost time. Draco and I, let's go for a walk. Leave this place for the girls to change. Ino glanced out the window at the darkening sky, then grabbed Draco, who was dazed beside him, pushed open the compartment, and headed for the train. Less than a quarter of an hour passed. The same sounds from last year echoed through the train compartment, as the train approached Hogsmeade Station. After a moment, the speed slowly slowed, finally coming to a complete stop on the tracks. Young wizards, like sturgeons migrating, shoved their way toward the doors. However, Ino's compartment was farther back, so he didn't have to crowd with the crowds at the front. He, Draco, Pansy, and the others trailed off at the back of the crowd. It seems there are a lot more freshmen this year, Daphne said, hinting at the crowd ahead. So we can't underestimate anyone's shrewdness, Pansy explained vaguely, then glanced at Draco with a playful look. Yet, that one glance was like stepping on someone's tail. Why are you looking at me? I'm planning to go to Durmstrang, but my mother insisted I come to Hogwarts. As they spoke, several people disembarked from the train and walked along a quiet path to a spacious lawn. After entering their second year, the young wizards no longer took the boats that once crossed Black Lake to the castle. Many magical carriages were parked on the empty lawn. They were magical because they lacked the animals pulling them, aside from the carriages. Of course, this was just the majority opinion. Ino saw the magical creatures pulling the carriages, Ministry of Magic rated 3X Thestrals. They resembled horses, but possessed exoskeletal bodies, leathery wings, and eyes as large as copper bells, gleaming with a faint blue light. Only those who have witnessed death can see the Thestrals, and for this reason, wizards consider them unlucky. Ino boarded a carriage smoothly, paying little attention to the Thestrals pulling it. After all, everyone has their specialties, and he wasn't like Newt, obsessed with magical creatures. The vast expanse of magical knowledge, transfiguration alone could take a lifetime to study, not to mention spells, herbs, potions, divination, alchemy. Learning everything is the only way to learn nothing. The Hogwarts Great Hall. As solemn and magnificent as ever, countless burning candles floated in the air, their warm orange glow making everything seem so inviting. At the Slytherin table, the young wizards, including Goyle and Crabbe, now entering their second year, all wore expressions ready to watch the spectacle unfold. After all, last year they were the protagonists, this year they were the audience. At the front of the hall, Professor McGonagall, still wearing her signature square-framed glasses and a vintage gray-black robe, clutched a parchment scroll. However, during the much-anticipated sorting ceremony, Snape strode into the Great Hall with long, steady strides, then walked directly towards Professor McGonagall, his demeanor as if he were afraid to be missed. Professor McGonagall departed, and the sorting ceremony was carried out by Professor Flitwick. Witnessing this dramatic scene from the sidelines, Ino also had a novel idea. Perhaps, the novel I Promised Madame Pants could include a wedding robbery plot, where the two sisters steal their future stepfather away at their mother's wedding. A new book launch, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to my collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to my collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 Professor McGonagall takes action. Slytherin adds 100 points. The Slytherin Common Room. This year's incoming Slytherin students stood obediently in the hall. Perhaps because Monty had already graduated, another prefect now stood before the new students. The same old routine, the same old plot. It seemed that setting rules for freshmen was a constant in Slytherin. Unlike the others, who were just watching the fun, Ino had quietly returned to his dorm. He pushed open the door. "Sorry. I actually forgot about you." Ino looked at the drooping, extremely yellow potted plant on his desk, regretting his carelessness. He had taken everything away before summer vacation, but he had forgotten the potted plant. From the moment he planted the seed to the moment it broke through the soil, he had watched it grow bit by bit. To say he had no feelings for it would be a lie. Clear water like a spring. A trickle of water poured from the tip of his wand, quickly absorbed, seeping into the dry, hardened soil. Perhaps it perfectly captures the moment, like a long-awaited sweet dew. Miraculously, however, this Narnia-inspired berry plant, nourished by the fresh water, visibly revived. The previously withered leaves had long since fallen, replaced by vibrant, juicy green leaves. Ino stared at the potted plant in astonishment. He couldn't understand how a few berries he'd casually brought home as a souvenir could have given him such a surprise. Not to mention the ice flowers planted in the traceless extension box, the vibrant vitality of this potted plant alone was truly unforgettable. "I should have grabbed a handful," Ino muttered unconsciously, but then dismissed the absurd thought. If he had truly known all this, he probably wouldn't have been able to bring these berries with him. The world of fantasy is truly magical. It doesn't judge by results, but by the truest expression of one's heart. Even if one believes it's just an ordinary berry, even if it's Adam's golden apple, one can still take it without paying. Similarly, when he felt he had no money, even if his bag was filled with gold coins, he could still carry it out easily. As he pondered this, the potted plant before him gradually began to recover. While still growing vigorously, it lacked the exaggerated vitality it once had. "I'll check it out later." Seeing the plant's return to normal, Ino stopped dwelling on the cause. Everything had to be prioritized. After all, what he had to do tomorrow was the most important thing of the school year. A silent night followed. In the morning, Ino quietly drew back the curtains of his bed. After confirming he had no classes that morning, he ignored Malfoy, who slept soundly beside him. After washing up alone, he opened the door and headed for the Transfiguration office. On the 6th floor of the castle, Professor McGonagall was reviewing the young wizard's summer homework with a headache, yet she couldn't help but feel a sense of resentment. It was all thanks to Harry and Ron. On the first day of school, not even a day had passed, Gryffindor had already lost 100 points. Even more frustrating was the fact that she had personally deducted the points. Knock. Knock. A knock echoed at the door. Professor McGonagall, as if finally finding an excuse, pushed aside the pile of summer homework and waved her wand, opening the office door. "Ino." After recognizing the person, Professor McGonagall's smile returned. This was her ideal student, excellent academically and morally, well-behaved, and most importantly, someone who wouldn't cause trouble for no apparent reason or lose dozens or even hundreds of points all at once. "Good morning, Professor McGonagall," Ino greeted with a smile. "Please take a seat. I only have one chair for you." Professor McGonagall, even offering a rare little joke to her ideal student, said, "You're early. They have a comprehensive review system for today's transfigurations. The earliest you'll hear the results is a week." "Professor, that's not why I'm here." He knew Professor McGonagall had misunderstood, and without further ado, he got straight to the point. "During the summer vacation, I experienced something that I felt I needed to share with you." A moment later, Ino finished his story about Ginny and the notebook, even including his own feelings and speculation about dark artifacts. "Wait here for a moment." Professor McGonagall said, standing up and swiftly leaving the office. She didn't doubt for a moment whether this was a prank or a misunderstanding. It seemed as if she couldn't abandon her students' safety, even if it meant a wasted trip. Bang! The door slammed shut. With Professor McGonagall gone, Ino sat back in his chair, bored, toying with his wand. Or, to put it another way, rubbing it. He stroked each raised knot on the elderberry tree. With each passing moment, he grew fonder of the wand. It was beyond easy handling, reaching a magical feeling akin to blood connection. Whenever he held the wand, it felt like an extension of his own arm. It was truly magical. Time slipped by. After about half an hour, the office door opened again. Professor McGonagall led Ginny in. Remarkably, she had a vintage notebook in her hands. The notebook was placed on the large desk. "Is that what you're talking about?" Professor McGonagall asked, pointing her wand at the surface. "Yes. That's it, that faint corrosive feeling." Ino replied calmly, then glanced apologetically at the panicked Ginny. He somewhat understood how Ginny felt. After all, on the second day of school, being suddenly rushed into her dorm by her own head of house would have been nerve-wracking for even a seventh-year graduating student, let alone Ginny, a freshman. As Professor McGonagall began to examine the notebook, Ino whispered to Ginny, "I'm so sorry. I noticed the problem that day, but I had no proof. That's why I wanted to trade you for the stationery, but your brother stopped me." Chatting seemed to soothe her nerves. Compared to Professor McGonagall's stern demeanor, Ginny gradually relaxed when she saw the gentle face of the senior across from her. "It's okay. On the contrary, I want to thank you," Ginny said weakly. "Actually, I've noticed something's wrong with it. Every time I write something in it, someone named Tom Marvolo Riddle appears." "What did you just say?" Professor McGonagall's stern voice echoed through the office. Although she was examining her notebook, she could hear the conversation between the two people opposite her word for word. Perhaps others didn't understand the name, but she knew its meaning all too well. Meanwhile, facing Professor McGonagall's full aura, seemingly unleashing some terrifying magic, Ino felt as if she were facing the White Witch, not to mention Ginny. "Sorry, children, I scared you." After realizing her mistake, Professor McGonagall changed her previous harsh tone and suddenly said gently, "Miss Weasley, please tell me what happened in detail again, everything." As if remembering something, Professor McGonagall suddenly turned her head and looked to the side. "I know. You can go back. This matter ends here. Don't mention it again. If what happened is true, I will add 100 points to Slytherin. Don't worry about that. A new book is released, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote." Chapter 90 The Feeling of Freedom. Leaving the Transfiguration office, Ino felt incredibly relieved. All the potential instability of his second year had been perfectly resolved. Now, he could finally stay in the library freely until curfew, exploring every corner of the castle at dawn and dusk. After all, since starting last year, because of Quirrell's presence, he hadn't been able to properly explore the castle, not even visiting the legendary Room of Requirement. Now, he could make up for that regret. Strolling alone through the castle corridors, Ino's mind flashed back to the previous scene. Honestly, the bonus points were a pleasant surprise, and compared to Professor McGonagall's generous bonuses of 50 or 100 points, Snape's stingy, 1 or 2 points, now seemed a little amusing. But he also understood that different positions came with different rights. After all, the vice-headmaster was still the headmaster, far more than Snape, a headmaster or potions master, could ever hope to achieve. He quietly left the 6th-floor corridor. He had no intention of going to the Great Hall for breakfast. Because, barring any unexpected events, Mrs. Weasley's howler would arrive as promised. This wasn't a Weird Sisters concert, there was no need to travel all the way from the 6th floor to the 1st floor to listen attentively. Even if one truly desired to suffer, this wasn't the way to do it. On the 8th floor of the castle. At the end of the right corridor, a beautiful tapestry hung on the wall. Trolls beat silly Barnabas with sticks. Looking at the figures on the tapestry, Ino sighed softly. If he had to name the 3 things that most interested him about Hogwarts, besides the library and the sorting hat, the Room of Requirement would be the only one. Whatever you wish for, it will be granted. Throughout the entire story, nothing could be more magical than this. He glanced quietly at the bustling corridor, choosing not to linger too long and draw attention, but instead turned and headed the other way. Now that he had already chosen the location, he might as well come and see it any weekend morning. There was no need to come in the morning when the crowds were so crowded. Meanwhile, the Transfiguration office was also a bit noisy. Unlike the stern faces of Dumbledore and Arthur, Mrs. Weasley, who had just finished sending the howler, now hugged Ginny tightly while scolding Percy beside her. It seemed like all parents were like this, even though Percy had nothing to do with the incident. But as the oldest brother in the castle, Percy had to bear it all alone. After understanding the whole story, Percy felt heartfelt gratitude to the Slytherin who had taken the initiative to report it. As the youngest child and the only girl, Ginny was favored beyond imagination in the Weasley family. After a moment, Mrs. Weasley seemed to be tired, or perhaps she was thinking of her son, whom she was so proud of. Her scolding gradually subsided. "Percy, you will personally convey our gratitude to the child later. Tell him that the Weasleys will always remember this kindness. Don't worry, Mother. I will see to it. Not only you, but I want to thank him too," Percy said with a lingering fear. Even from merely observing the situation, he had already sensed that the notebook seemed incredibly dangerous. He couldn't imagine the consequences if he let it go. "That's good. I'm sure you'll handle this," Mrs. Weasley said briefly, then lowered her head and whispered comforting words to Ginny. As for Ron, neither of them mentioned him at all. After all, the incident had already happened, and blaming him was pointless. It would only add to the family conflict. Across the castle, in the Great Hall, the young wizards, fresh from the Howler bombardment, stared in astonishment at the green hourglass representing Slytherin. Just then, in the blink of an eye, Slytherin had gained a full 100 points. This wasn't just the 3 or 5 points you'd get in a normal class. A full 100 points instantly surpassed Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, and stood in stark contrast to the negative Gryffindor. The dramatic change sent the entire Great Hall into an uproar. All the young wizards were chattering away, trying their best to pass on information and share their own perspectives on the matter. As the house in question, Slytherin took immediate action. People began to stand up and leave the long table, presumably to gather accurate information. Meanwhile, Ino, the instigator of this whole situation, was on his way to the library. He was not only fulfilling his promise to bring Madame Pants the latest romance novels, but also to begin his later animagus studies. After all, both the mandrake leaves he held in his mouth and the preparation of the later potions had already been completed during the summer vacation. Similarly, with his transfiguration skills improving, some things needed to be put on the agenda. He also had a small bottle of Felix Felicis hidden in his suitcase, a safety precaution in case of need. Hogwarts Library. Every time he came here, he felt a sense of comfort and ease. It was as if the air was filtered through carefully woven silk, and every breath seemed light and silent. Between the bookshelves, shadows and light intertwined, casting variegated patterns, like the marks of history, quietly telling the passage of time. Footsteps barely echoed, only the occasional rustle of pages, like the whisper of wind through a bamboo forest. Time seemed to slow down here, each moment seeming especially elongated. Unlike the bustle and bustle of the castle, the library felt like a secluded, otherworldly realm. Entering the library, Ino slowly walked to the table to the far left of the entrance, Madame Pants's work desk. Without disturbing Madame Pants, who was immersed in her reading, he gently placed the book on the table and turned to leave. After setting the book down, he marveled once again at the wonders of magic. A novel of over 100,000 words could be completed overnight with just one automatic writing quill, sold for 12 galleons by Hogsmeade's writer's house. Just like the quill used by the renowned journalist Rita Skeeter in the story, these quills seemed to read minds. As long as the holder's mind conjured a thought, the quill could write fluently. In a sense, this magical quill was the treasure every novelist coveted. Meanwhile, Madame Pants had noticed the extra book on the table. Or rather, she'd noticed it from the beginning, but she was so engrossed in her reading that she didn't bother looking up. It was just the young wizards returning their borrowed books. A new book. Madame Pants thought to herself. Curious, she flipped open the page and was greeted by a line of neat, uniform letters. "My sister and I's soulmate, the ruthless stepfather." The writing style, the title, it felt so familiar. Madame Pants instantly understood the book's origins. She cradled the book in her hands as if it were a treasure and began to read carefully. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please vote for it. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please vote for it. Chapter 91 Billowig. Some things are like a midsummer thunderstorm. They arrive swiftly and passionately, yet depart just as quickly and silently. Initially, they sweep in like a torrential downpour, instantly igniting the entire castle with enthusiasm. The common room, the corridors, the dormitories, were abuzz with discussion, as if the entire world were engulfed in this wave of enthusiasm. However, this enthusiasm often doesn't last long. Like a summer downpour, it comes and goes quickly. Soon, interest fades like the receding tide. The once hot topic of flying cars and Slytherin bonus points is now rarely mentioned. Life has returned to its normal course. Perhaps this is the charm of life. It's always full of unknowns and uncertainties, making it impossible to predict what will happen next, and then, when it does, we lament the unpredictable nature of life. It was another ordinary morning. Draco got up, washed up, and sat in a nearby chair, his chin resting on his hands, carefully examining the odd items stacked on the table. Unknown candies, unknown cookies, and a pair of alchemical props shaped like ears. I know, what's wrong with the Weasley twins? They've given you so many things today. This is the third time. I advise you not to touch them. Forget how your eyes got swollen last time. Ino looked at Draco with amusement. Last time, out of curiosity, he picked up the boxing glasses and played with them, which resulted in a black eye. I'm not interested in touching them. See how far away I am. Draco spread his hands, indicating that he wouldn't touch them. That's fine. This time it's an experimental product. If you really eat that cookie, it won't be just a black eye. Despite this, Ino still put away the joke props on the table. After all, George and Fred had already explained that these things were experimental products, especially the canary cookies. Speaking of these joke props, we have to talk about Ginny. Because of Tom's notes, ever since Percy thanked him on behalf of the Wheeleyes. Not only did he receive letters from Bill and Charlie, but George and Fred also regularly sent him new gadgets. They also solemnly presented him with a handwritten membership card, signed by both of them. They promised him a 20% discount at their joke shop forever. Although the twins' actions were a bit childish, Ino solemnly put the card away and tucked it away among his books for safekeeping. After all, in all of Gryffindor, besides Hermione, he admired George and Fred the most, and perhaps even Neville after his transformation. Time flew by. 2 hours flew by. At 9:30 a.m., Ino picked up a stack of hardcover novels and left the dormitory. After a series of hilarious slapstick incidents in defense against the dark arts class, almost all students above the third year unanimously agreed that Lockhart was just a showpiece. Similarly, after countless embarrassing moments, Lockhart's popularity had waned significantly, and he had essentially given up teaching above the third year. Every class consisted of either reciting novels or performing plays. Of course, as the future of Hogwarts, the first and second year wizards remained Lockhart's goal. Defense against the dark arts classroom. 10 o'clock in the morning. Punctual as always, Lockhart entered the classroom, dressed to the nines, as if the Cornish elves incident 2 days prior had never happened. Me. Lockhart said, smiling, pointing to his photo on the cover of his novel. Gerald Lockhart, Sir Merlin. As if it were a ritual at the beginning of every class, Lockhart once again emphasized his identity and the various titles he had earned. After a lengthy self-introduction, he adopted a serious tone. I'm very disappointed with your last defense against the dark arts professor. Extremely disappointed. I thought he would be somewhat helpful, but under his guidance, the second-year wizards couldn't even handle a group of Cornish elves. Lockhart's words caused a bit of a commotion in the classroom. There are no secrets at Hogwarts. The young wizards below were fully aware of someone's performance in the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff class 2 days ago. Ahem. Lockhart cleared his throat. But that's in the past. Since I've accepted Dumbledore's invitation, I can't just sit back and watch. Today. Let's start with something simpler, a 1x Billowig bug rated by the Ministry of Magic. As he spoke, Lockhart calmly pulled a massive 2-foot-long cage from under the podium, as if a 1x Billowig bug was far easier to deal with than a 2x Cornish pixie. The massive cage was placed on the podium, covered with black cloth, but the humming sound beneath the cloth was incessant. He's crazy. Draco's eyes widened, and he swallowed hard. I know, let's just run away. If he dares to open that cage, we might as well use the Cornelius elves. It's okay, I know, interrupted Draco, then gave him a reassuring look and soothed him. Don't worry, Although the billywhigs have stings, they're gentle, otherwise they wouldn't be divided into 1x. Let's try not to provoke them for a while, and they'll probably fly away on their own. Looking around, the classroom had only one exit. He knew that if he really led the escape, the resulting chaos might cause more damage than a single insect sting. Billywhigs are magical creatures, only half an inch long, with a jade green body. Their wings grow on either side of their heads, causing them to spin unconsciously when flying. They also have a long, thin stinger on their abdomens. Of course, this may not be a complete description, but you can think of them as mutant giant wasps. However, a billywhig sting is also very uncomfortable, and may even cause dizziness and collapse. But one thing is certain, they're non-toxic. Their stings are even used as an ingredient in Zizzy honey candy. Okay, Malfoy agreed, looking around and noticing only blue Ravenclaws in the classroom. Perhaps you're right. Nerds aren't reckless. Ravenclaws and Slytherins are always the safest classmate. They always think and assess the situation before taking any action. As the two were talking, Lockhart made another move. He first ordered all students to close the windows, fearing they might accidentally throw their wands out. This move made everyone's eyelids flutter, but before they could react, Lockhart decisively opened the cage. Children, use all the means you know to deal with them. Don't worry. I'll be protecting you outside. He opened the cage, grabbed his coat, and scurried out the door in a few steps. Lockhart executed the entire process with remarkable fluidity. Bang! The classroom door slammed shut. Lockhart had once again successfully surpassed his limit. If a professor in a Muggle school brought a basket of wasps to a classroom, then locked the doors and windows, released the wasps, and then ran out, what kind of behavior would that be? But now, no one could complain, because the entire classroom was filled with flying billywhigs, a vast swarm swirling above the classroom with a buzzing sound. Unlike the others, who sat in a state of formality, Ino, observing the swarm of billywhigs, thought of the Auror's death-proof vests mentioned in the original story, and an inspiration struck him, another extension of ice magic. He had always limited himself to the big when it came to transfiguration, whether it was the Whomping Willow or the Anaconda. But today, the billywhigs reminded him of the small that he had always neglected. Perhaps he could leverage his strengths and perfectly combine ice and transfiguration, transforming every fluttering snowflake into an ice sculpture of a billywhig. If this magic could be truly developed, a swarm of billywhigs would form, obscuring the sky and the sun. Besides blocking the killing curse, it could also disrupt the opponent's vision, conceal their position, and even directly affect their magic. I know, I can't go on like this. Draco's expression was so tense that he barely moved as he spoke. Similarly, the young wizards in the classroom remained silent, even though many had billywhig bugs crawling all over their robes. In this situation, a single trigger could detonate the entire place, triggering an unpredictable chain reaction. Hearing Draco's trembling voice, Ino regained his composure and took in his surroundings. He saw several girls, their heads covered in bugs, looking as if they were on the verge of tears. Without hesitation, he immediately picked up the wand on the table. Winter is coming. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 92 The Frozen Classroom. Winter is coming. Ino stood up, waving his wand toward the sky. As the spell rang out, the entire classroom seemed to be torn apart by a mysterious force, and the once restless billywhig swarm quieted down. In a split second, the room felt as if it had undergone a time-space distortion, and the once bright light dimmed. The temperature plummeted, plunging everyone into a chilly winter evening. The walls, floor, ceiling, even the tables and chairs were visibly covered in a thick layer of frost. Spots of snow began to fall in the air, and then the flakes grew larger and larger, transforming the entire classroom into a world of ice and snow. Accompanying the falling snow was a howling wind, mingling with the icy snow, rattling the doors and windows. Faced with this sudden change, the young wizards huddled together, some trying to block the blizzard with their hands, while others stared with wide eyes, curiously observing this magical miracle. The blizzard had arrived just as quickly as it had vanished. Seeing the billywhig worms scattering like raindrops in the cold sky, Ino stopped his magic. After all, the problem had been solved, continuing would have risked accidental injury. Though the magic had ceased, the snowflakes suspended in the air, guided by inertia, continued to swirl around his body, each one a loyal guard. The snowflakes danced, each a shimmering shimmer under the influence of the magic. Black robes, white falling snow. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. Unlike the Ravenclaws, who were deep in thought, the eyes of the Slytherins in the classroom shone with a different brilliance. Pansy, in particular, at the back table, had an inexplicable glint in her eyes, a fusion of paranoia and fanaticism. What are you waiting for? Please bring back our beloved professor. Ino was the first to break the stillness of the quiet classroom. His words, like a magic spell, caused a Ravenclaw girl sitting in the first row, near the door, to stand up without a second thought and walk out. A minute later. You did better than I expected, you know? I almost had to make a move just now, but thankfully you didn't let me down. Even before he entered the classroom, his signature boastful voice reached everyone's ears. Oh wow. Lockhart walked through the door, looking at the frozen classroom in disbelief, and exclaimed. Excellent. I'm indeed wise. Testing you with one billywig is much safer than two Cornish elves. Lockhart, always a boaster, finally noticed a lone figure standing in the room after a moment of self-praise. By the way, kid, what's your name? Ino. Ino Swinburne, Ino replied calmly. Excellent, truly excellent. Mr. Swinburne, under my guidance, has perfectly handled those annoying little buggers. So, 10 points to Slytherin. Lockhart's voice was filled with excitement, as if after 2 weeks of consecutive defeats, he finally felt vindicated as a professor. Though the farce of the class ended, it had left a deep impression on many young wizards. After class, everyone left the classroom one after another. I know, your magic just now was amazing. You used this to freeze me last time, right? Draco was clearly hurt, yet there was a hint of pride in his tone. Before he could reply, a gentle voice echoed from behind him. I know, I have some books on air-made snow spells and freezing spells at home. I'll bring them to you next time. Pansy quietly stood beside them, her voice as gentle and soothing as an April breeze, gently caressing their faces. Books? Ino suddenly realized, then looked at Pansy with an apologetic look. Sorry. I forgot to return the sunlight spell to you. It was his fault. He had actually finished reading the book before summer vacation, but somehow he had forgotten about it. It's okay. It doesn't affect anything. If that book were mine, I'd have given it to you, Pansy said with a steady smile, seemingly unconcerned. But it was my mistake. I'll find it when I get back. As for the snowmaking and freezing spells you mentioned, I'm quite interested. Anyway, thank you. Ino replied politely. He was also curious about these two spells, and it was a good opportunity to review them. After all, there's nothing wrong with learning by analogy. Speaking of spells, Hogwarts' joyful education is undeniable. For 7 years, young wizards learned fewer than 50 spells, if not even 50. After all, many spells were repeated, such as the summoning and repairing spells, which were learned from 1st to 7th grade. Miranda Goshawk's original copy of the Standard Book of Spells was confined to the restricted section, with the excuse that it contained too many potentially harmful spells unsuitable for young wizards. On the other side, after receiving a positive response, Pansy also smiled lightly and said, I'm going to go back and write a letter home now. I won't disturb you guys chatting now. Looking at Pansy's back as she quietly left, Draco murmured subconsciously, have you noticed that she seems to have changed? Suddenly. Changed. Ino glanced at Pansy's back in confusion. Maybe the billywood bug scared her just now, but I think this is a good thing. A good thing. Draco's tone was full of doubt. Yes. A good thing. Ino nodded with certainty, and then said, it's like a rose that originally had thorns, gradually shedding its sharp coat and becoming quiet and introverted. It's a kind of growth, a transformation from external hardness and sharpness to internal flexibility and strength. Although I don't quite understand, it sounds amazing. Draco shrugged indifferently, as if he didn't care about it. I know, including this 10 points, you've already earned 125 points in the first 2 weeks of school. Looks like we can win the House Cup again this year. Seeing Draco's slightly smug expression, Ino smiled non-committally. Perhaps this was the student years. They were filled with countless experiences worth cherishing, and that was their unique charm. Young wizards, for the House Cup, for a seemingly unrealistic goal, gave their all, working tirelessly. It was like going to an amusement park at 12, you'd feel fresh and excited, wanting to share. But at 32, going again, you'd just watch quietly, never having the same feeling. The young wizards laughed and cried, felt joy and sorrow, but they didn't waste their student experiences. Draco, you're right. This year, it's highly likely no one will be able to steal our house cup, because the castle is safe. Ino said with conviction. At that moment, he no longer viewed the house cup with a mature mindset, but chose to join the game. After all, some things are gone forever, and can't be retrieved. All that remains are memories. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 93 The Bloodline of the Charn Royal Family. Although he had never seen Los Angeles at 4 in the morning, Ino could describe Hogwarts at 6. The castle at 6. The sky was still shrouded in a deep blue black, the stars still gleaming faintly. The castle hadn't fully awakened yet, only a few portraits, accustomed to early risers, rubbed their sleepy eyes within their frames. The corridor was eerily silent. Of course, this wasn't absolute. Occasionally, one could hear whispers from a distant classroom, or the gentle movements of a magical creature in a corner. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it the faint scent of the forbidden forest and a subtle hint of magic. On the 8th floor of the castle, standing in front of the tapestry in the room of requirement. I want to enter the town that once belonged to old John. I want to enter the town that once belonged to old John. To verify his hypothesis, Ino repeated it in his mind, walking back and forth across the wall. After a moment, a smooth door emerged from the wall, and without hesitation, he pushed it open and entered. What greeted him was a hazy, gray space. There were no familiar buildings, no small town square, not even a glimpse of sky or earth. If it weren't for the solid feeling beneath his feet, he'd have thought he was in a void. He pushed the door open and left. Once again, he stood before the tapestry. I want to enter the world of ice and snow. I want to enter the world of ice and snow. And this time, the room of requirement didn't disappoint him. Gazing at the pristine white expanse of ice, Ino couldn't help but feel a surge of comfort. He took a deep breath, the icy air rushing into his lungs, yet it brought a refreshing, invigorating feeling. It felt as if it could penetrate his body and reach deep into his heart, an indescribable sense of comfort and solace. The snow crunched beneath his feet, leaving deep footprints with each step. At that moment, he felt as if he had become one with the snowy land. A sense of openness and relaxation permeated him from within. All worries and stress seemed to melt away in the pure snow, and even his soul found an unprecedented tranquility. He bent down, casually grabbed a handful of snow and tossed it into the air. As the flakes fell, they transformed into billywood worms. No wand, no spell. But he knew this wasn't a wandless, silent transfiguration spell, it was simply a mastery of ice and snow. Like a talent in his blood, fish are naturally adapted to water, birds are naturally adapted to flight, and he was naturally adapted to frost. Without any purpose or desire, he wandered alone through the snow. Time passed slowly. After a long moment, Ino fell backward, as if to rest in the snow. However, just 3 feet from the ground, a high-backed chair made of frozen ice suddenly rose from the ground, firmly supporting his falling body. That saves me from buying furniture. With a chuckle, Ino leaned back in the chair, one hand supporting his chin, the other gently tapping the ice crystal armrest. After a brief moment of relaxation, he calmed down and reflected on what he had just experienced. It was obvious that the room of requirement couldn't embody the scenes of a fantasy story. Just now, to avoid some unknown trouble, he had deliberately chosen small, unit-like stories and scenes. Yet, even so, the room of requirement remained unfulfilled. This inevitably led him to ponder whether stories were parallel lines that never intersected. Or, like in The Elderberry Mother, was everything a dream? I can't think about this anymore. Ino murmured softly, opening his hands. A handful of snow quickly emerged from his hands, and he covered his face with it as if washing in the bathroom. He felt as if he had just gone mad. In a magical world, in the room of requirement, he dared to ponder philosophy, to contemplate the truth and the denial of existence. Perhaps this was simply a case of living too comfortably, seeking excitement. Time passed slowly. Ino sat quietly in a high-backed chair, fine snow still clinging to his cheeks. I have to go back and water the flowers. As if mentally giving himself a reason to leave, he stood decisively and headed for the door. This trip had already yielded much. Not only had he seen the room of requirement, but he had also quietly confirmed his inner suspicions. Furthermore, the spiritual baptism he had just experienced had elevated his control over ice and snow to a new level, almost as if he could cast aside his wand and unleash its magic on his own. Having gained so much, staying any longer would be a form of greed. Of course, this was merely a superficial reason. After all, a subtle fear of the room of requirement had already grown within him. Staying here would inevitably lead to contemplation, and contemplation can be dangerous. Contemplation in a place where wishes can be fulfilled and requests can be granted is even more dangerous. The 8th floor corridor. As the castle's young wizards knew, moving staircases were often the most difficult to master. A single mistake could not only delay progress but could even backfire. How about turning it into an ice slide? Going uphill is easier than going down. Standing at the top of the stairs, Ino muttered, looking down. The distance across the castle, roughly from the 8th floor to the Slytherin common room, was a distance that made the young wizard literally measure the castle's height with his feet. Through the dusty windows of the corridor, the sky outside was still a hazy gray-blue, and the entire castle seemed to have barely emerged from its deep slumber. Just as he was planning to take advantage of the morning's quietness and use the slide to quickly cross, a series of steady, powerful footsteps echoed from behind him. Thump. Thump. Since someone was around, Ino didn't plan to turn it into an ice slide again. Even though a whole school year had passed, he knew that if the vengeful Filch saw him, he would probably be subjected to endless nagging and cold stares. He slowly turned around and saw an old man in moon-white robes and a pastel blue nightcap. There was no one else in Hogwarts who wore such a novel and playful outfit, undoubtedly a unique feature of the castle. "Good morning, Professor Dumbledore." Seeing him, Ino took the initiative to greet him. "Good morning, Ino." Dumbledore smiled, raised his hand, and straightened his tilted nightcap. "It seems you've just experienced something very interesting." "Interesting? Perhaps. Don't you know this house?" Ino turned to look at the tapestry in the hallway. "The coming and going room. Amazing, isn't it? But that's not what I'm talking about." Dumbledore's eyes gleamed with wisdom, and he raised his hand to point at the smooth wall. Then, the entire wall quickly transformed into a 6-foot-tall dressing mirror. In front of the mirror, Ino was also surprised to discover the problem. His appearance had not changed, still handsome, but both his hair color and his eyes had undergone subtle adjustments under the reflection of the dressing mirror. First, the amber pupils faded, like an illustration drawn on paper with a nearly dried watercolor pen. The next thing was the change in his hair. His short, dark hair, in the candlelight, reflected a faint azure shimmer. Though the shimmer was barely noticeable, change was a change. Ino quickly realized that everything had a price. It was clear that the after effects of his sudden, heightened control over ice and snow in the room of requirement had set in. His hair color and pupils seemed to be gradually shifting towards those of a white witch, traits of the royal bloodline of Charn, descended from another world. While other factors were possible, this was the most plausible explanation. He then thought back to his performance in defense against the dark arts class a few days ago. Looking back, it seemed as if his bloodline had unconsciously influenced his personality. Now, reflecting on it, he noticed many differences. Since the start of the school year, his every move and speech had undergone subtle changes. If the same thing had happened in his first year, not only would the billywood bug not have stung anyone, but it would have stung the classroom with a cacophony of screams and howls. At best, he'd quietly cast his magic and then hide to protect himself. There was no way he'd make a big move and freeze the entire classroom. A new book release, a new journey. Thank you all for your support. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 94 The Legendary Principal's Office. Dawn hadn't yet broken, but the eastern sky was already bright. Faint light streamed through the windows, casting a faint glow on the bluestone paving of the castle corridor. Magic torches flickered along the walls, seemingly about to go out at any moment. In the alternating light and darkness of the corridor, Dumbledore slowly spoke. "It's been a while since we've spoken. My office is right on this floor, and we could have breakfast together, if you don't mind." Faced with this sudden invitation, Ino pondered it before agreeing. "Of course, Professor. It's my honor. It saves us from having to go to a crowded great hall. After all, when he decided to give Professor McGonagall Tom's notebook, he knew this day would come sooner or later. It was inevitable. The Hogwarts headmaster's office, while accessible from the 8th floor corridor, was essentially a separate tower. Ino followed Dumbledore, finally arriving at a door guarded by a massive stone beast. "Sizzle, honey candy." Dumbledore unequivocally pronounced the command, then turned and glanced behind him with a smile. Only Honeydukes uses the sting of billowwigs, so their candies taste the most authentic. Thanks to you, we have a qualified defense against the dark arts professor. At least he's put his heart into collecting magical creatures. Ino didn't hide his dissatisfaction. After all, after their last frank conversation, he didn't have much of a problem with the old headmaster. Haha, many people are dissatisfied with Lockhart, including Minerva, Dumbledore said with a smile. But there's no denying that Lockhart has his role. Rather than learning a few more magic tricks, I believe it's more important for young wizards to cultivate the right qualities and recognize the consequences of vanity, pride, and arrogance. Upon hearing Dumbledore's reasons, Ino didn't speak immediately. It was undeniable that what Dumbledore said made sense, even important. After all, in the long run, skills are never as important as character. Honestly, people with ability but no moral integrity often cause immense harm to those around them. Perhaps you're right. But I think without the necessary abilities, young wizards won't have the means to save themselves when they're in danger. After all, when it comes to survival, quality doesn't seem that important. He didn't deny Dumbledore's decision, but he also expressed his own opinion. Hogwarts isn't a school for muggles, it's a supernatural institution that teaches magic. The supernatural, by its very nature, is unequal. And that's not to mention the centuries-old feud between muggles and wizards. It seems we have a disagreement on this point, but that's okay. We can talk while we eat. As Dumbledore finished speaking, the stone beast slowly opened, revealing a spiral staircase hidden behind it. Beyond the staircase was a gleaming oak door with a brass knocker in the shape of a griffin. The office was a spacious, bright circular room, its walls covered with portraits of past headmasters. Perhaps it was the early hour, but most of the portraits were snoring. In the center of the room stood a large desk, upon which lay a collection of exquisite silverware. "Please take a seat. We'll just have some sweets to fill our stomachs at this hour. It'll take some time for the kitchen to serve breakfast, and even as the headmaster, I have no right to change that." Dumbledore smiled as he walked over to a nearby locker and opened it, revealing jars of brightly colored candy. However, a quick glance revealed another interesting item in the locker, a pensieve, the recipe of which had been lost. After a brief delay, Dumbledore laid out the various candies on the table. "I know, you're quite right. In the face of life, many things seem unimportant." Dumbledore sat down and continued his previous conversation. "What I'm saying is that, in today's peaceful world, both the wizarding and muggle worlds are experiencing, and in this context, quality has become even more important. Having just one person like Lockhart is more than enough." Hearing this explanation, Ino couldn't help but laugh. "Professor, I won't argue with you. I'm just here for breakfast and to chat about interesting topics, like composing and music." He could see that Dumbledore was a bit stubborn. If that was the case, there was no point in discussing the subject further. After all, it had already happened. Meanwhile, Dumbledore said nothing more. He glanced out the window at the gray-blue sky, a deep glint in his eyes. Then, with a calm demeanor, he deftly steered the conversation in a new direction. "Or perhaps we could talk about magic, Ino. What do you think magic is?" "What is magic?" The moment he heard the question, Ino realized it might be a test. After all, Dumbledore had asked another student the same question half a century earlier. Looking at Dumbledore's aged face, he didn't intend to play along. While occlumency and the protection of ice made deception easy, somehow, the thought of a future leap from the tower made him reluctant to lie. After all, he had no intention of becoming the third Dark Lord. He simply wanted to live a quiet existence in this chaotic world, nothing more. "Professor, I believe magic is a miracle. It's the guarantee of my life and the means of survival." At this, Ino leaned back slightly, adjusting to a more comfortable sitting position. "Before coming to Hogwarts, I made a living by divination. Without magic, I might have frozen to death under a bridge or starved to death by the Thames. No matter how others view magic, for me, it is what it is. With magic, I can live the life I want and secure everything I have." After saying this, Ino looked up at Dumbledore, their eyes meeting without a flicker of his gaze. A brief silence fell over the office, even the snoring of the portraits nearby quieted down considerably. A long pause passed. "Thank you for your trust." Dumbledore broke the silence, his voice filled with relief and relief. "You know what? As an old man, he always unconsciously thinks about what's ahead of him. They praise me as the greatest white wizard of the 20th century. Although I don't agree, as the headmaster of Hogwarts, I truly hope that every young wizard who comes here can be truly happy. And all I can do is strive to keep their happiness alive." At this point, Dumbledore's expression shifted slightly. He gently removed his signature glasses, revealing a pair of deep, azure eyes. Those eyes seemed to conceal a profound emotion, as if a faint mist permeated the azure, making it appear softer and more moist. "Professor, the crown elevates its wearer. It's a symbol of status. But its true meaning is that it protects against disaster. And you, truly worthy of the title of Headmaster of Hogwarts, shines with you." This wasn't a compliment. At that moment, Ino was offering genuine praise. Dumbledore has been Headmaster of Hogwarts since 1944. For 48 years, no student has died accidentally in the castle. Similarly, whether during the years of the Wiccan Party or the decades of Voldemort's rampage, Hogwarts remained largely unaffected. No other headmaster could possibly match Dumbledore's performance. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly vote. Thank you all for your support. Finally, I have a book recommendation, Hogwarts Global Project. It features a single female protagonist, Hermione, and is set in an everyday setting, but the author handles the emotional details beautifully, making it a heartwarming read. Chapter 95 Quidditch? I'm a professional cheerleader. Before I knew it, the sky had brightened. The first rays of morning sunlight slowly filtered through the thick clouds, like a thread of carefully polished gold, gently yet firmly penetrating the slits in the room's curtains. The sunlight cast dappled shadows on the curtains. As the curtains swayed gently, these shadows danced across the wall, like a group of dancing moon-crazed beasts. On the spacious desk, a variety of English breakfasts were neatly arranged, emitting an enticing aroma. A golden fried egg lay quietly on a plate, its edges slightly curled, revealing its alluring warmth. Next to it was a plate of perfectly toasted bread, slightly browned and emitting a rich wheat aroma. A pot of hot tea steamed, its fragrance mingling with the aroma of breakfast to create a unique morning scent. Next to the teacup, a small dish of jam, the vibrant red berries and the rich blueberries complementing each other beautifully, adding a touch of color to the breakfast. A plate of freshly cut fruit sat on the corner of the table. Glistening grapes, rosy apples, and golden bananas looked particularly enticing in the morning light. The entire office felt peaceful and warm in the early morning sunshine. Ino picked up the teacup and gently tapped the white wall with his right index finger. In the blink of an eye, the scalding, steaming black tea softened. After gulping down the tea in one gulp, he improvised, "I still prefer jasmine tea to black tea. That sweetness amidst the bitterness." Even after living here for over a decade, he still wasn't used to adding honey to his tea. Although it made the taste richer and smoother, he just didn't like it. Very practical magic. Some impatient people will probably appreciate it, Dumbledore said with a smile. Ino put down his teacup and said, half jokingly, "Then they're doomed to be disappointed. Just like many people like the Phoenix only likes the Dumbledore family." He deliberately cooled the tea, even though Dumbledore never mentioned the frozen defense against the dark arts classroom, or even the changes in hair color or eyes. There were some things Dumbledore could ignore, but he couldn't pretend they didn't happen. Therefore, he used the joke to suggest that ice magic was a natural gift, just as the Dumbledore family was favored by the Phoenix. He attributed everything to bloodline, thus minimizing any outside attention. Any genuine curiosity would only look up the Swinburne name. Sure enough, upon hearing this, Dumbledore nodded in agreement. Yes, some people are destined to be disappointed. Because the secrets of magic are never fully understood, not even Merlin. Just like Miss Tonks a few years ago, no one could have guessed she could be a metamorphmagus. She woke up with her hair purple. Listening to Dumbledore's ramblings about the past, Ino suddenly realized how comforting it was to chat with such an intelligent person. He also grew increasingly fond of Dumbledore's approach, resolving problems calmly and even planning a backup plan and an excuse. Metamorphmagus, a gift that allows one to change one's appearance at will without the need for Polyjuice Potion, is both practical and magical. It could be said that he was born to be an Auror. Dumbledore's mention of Tonks was also a silent hint, telling him that a slight change in appearance wasn't something to worry about. After all, there were precedents. Time slipped by silently. At 8:30 a.m., after breakfast, Ino left the headmaster's office. This conversation with Dumbledore had been quite satisfying. Not only did he express his innermost desire, reassuring the old headmaster, but he also turned his attention back to Harry. Because, before leaving, he quietly mentioned, Harry also has a faint evil and bewitching aura, just like the notebook, although Harry's is more subtle. He strolled along the bluestone corridor on the 8th floor. Although it was the weekend, after daybreak, many students were passing by, which also gave up his idea of slacking off on the slide. He dutifully walked down the sliding staircase, one floor at a time. This morning, things had been one after another, and it was rare for him to calm down and think carefully. Blood is real blood, that hadn't deceived Dumbledore. But the only thing that puzzled him was the change in himself. Was it the peculiarities of the room of requirement, or the result of not suppressing his personality for a while? With this doubt in his mind, Ino slowly walked into the Slytherin common room. Gently turning the handle on the dormitory door, it slowly opened. Unexpectedly, Draco woke up early today, even on a weekend morning. Weekends were usually filled with laziness, with people sleeping in until noon. But today, Draco was already fully dressed and sitting on the edge of his bed, his eyes clear as a flash as he stared at the round table in his dorm room. On the table sat 7 long packages, all carefully and tightly bound with brown paper. Ino glanced at the dorm alarm clock. The hands had just hit 9. There was no doubt that Draco had gotten up early, a rare occasion. Did you rob the Quidditch boutique? Are you sitting here in a daze? Are you thinking about turning yourself into the Aurors? As soon as the words left his mouth, Draco shuddered, then turned around with a look of delight. You're back. I've been waiting for you. 7 broomsticks, Nimbus 2001, Draco said proudly, pointing to the packages on the round table. I know, want to play Quidditch? Pick a position, I'll talk to Flint, it'll be done. And then, before he could reply, he heard Draco hesitantly say, could you not pick the secret position? I want to give Scarhead a good fight. Seeing Draco's expression, Ino couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I won't take your position. Just play your game. I prefer being a professional cheerleader to being on the field. Professional cheerleader? Draco said, puzzled. Yes. Professional cheerleaders are responsible for getting the crowd excited before the game. Isn't that what commentators do? Seeing Draco still looking bewildered, he could only explain the specific responsibilities of professional cheerleaders in Muggle sports. Actually, he had toyed with the idea after discovering the accordion's ability to arrange music, but with a new student and Quirrell rampaging, he had to give up the idea. Now that the classroom was frozen, keeping a low profile wouldn't help. His inner desire to perform resurfaced. The Cup of Life from 1998, the soccer anthem from 2002, The Time of Our Lives from 2006, even Waka Waka, the classic from the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. So many incredibly powerful songs, just change a few words and they could be performed at the Quidditch Stadium. If the response was good enough, he even considered the Quidditch World Cup in his 4th year, a grand stage featuring 100,000 wizards from around the world. If he could perform, he could pay off the 6,000 galleons he owed Pansy for his house in one go. After all, being in debt was a tough feeling. Please bookmark. Please recommend. Please vote. Thank you all for your support. Finally, Zaya Odie recommends a book, Hogwarts Global Project. It features a single female protagonist, Hermione, and is a bit of an everyday story, but the author handles the emotional details well, making it a heartwarming read. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Combination of Ice Magic and Transfiguration. The Slytherin green decor gave the dorm a simple and soothing look. A clock hung quietly on the wall, its second hand ticking slowly, a subtle, even sound. I know, although you're right, today is my first Quidditch practice. Do you want to come? Draco was relieved when he learned that Ino wouldn't take his secret position. But after hearing about the latter, who would only be cheerleading and not playing, His expression became somewhat lost, like a puppy abandoned by its owner. He was in no hurry to leave. He stood at the dormitory door, 7 brooms in his arms, with a hesitant look on his face. He stood there blankly, as if waiting for a final plea to stay. Well, Ino admitted that he was a little fed up with the other person's expression. Okay, I'll go. You can go have breakfast now, or talk to Flint about broom distribution. I'll be at the Quidditch pitch in an hour. Okay. It's a deal. Draco happily left the dormitory. Bang. The door closed. Ino vanished into the room. A magical path. But Ino preferred to call it a sanctuary, because staying there gave him an unusual sense of security, a feeling of being sheltered and absolutely safe. A lone suitcase sat prominently on the dozens of meters of path leading to the sanctuary. The purpose of his trip was to retrieve the accordion from the suitcase and compose a piece for Quidditch for the second half of the school year. However, after taking in his surroundings, he no longer cared about composing. The ice and snow in the sanctuary had vanished completely. In its place stood a frost Amazon anaconda, over 40 feet long and as thick as a bucket. This sudden change startled him. He remembered the 3 brooms from the previous time. Pansy's knock had prevented him from disabling his transfiguration spell and hastily leaving. Who would have thought that in just one summer vacation, this ice snake would devour the surrounding ice and snow, not only increasing in size but also changing in color. The color change was understandable, as it resembled the Antarctic glaciers. Prolonged freezing not only altered their density. At the same time, impurities in the air, as well as exposure to visible and short-wavelength light, alter the color of the ice, turning it from azure to dark green. However, he had never seen such a sudden increase in size after just 2 or 3 months. Meanwhile, the anaconda, previously curled up like a still sculpture, seemed to be slowly awakening from a long hibernation. Its body, over 10 meters long, began to slowly stretch out, like a willow branch awakened by a spring breeze. Then, the anaconda slithered and zigzagged, appearing graceful and composed. Though its movements were slow, they were still visually captivating. Most importantly, the anaconda's massive size posed a formidable threat. After all, the average person wouldn't react rashly if targeted by a python over 10 meters long. It's so big, and it's even actively devouring. Ino muttered in confusion, glancing at the giant python at his feet. Then, he drew his wand and once again shrouded the entire shelter in ice and snow. Although he knew the advantages of combining ice magic with transfiguration, like this anaconda, as long as the temperature was right and the ice and snow didn't melt, it would persist forever. But who could have imagined discovering another unexpected surprise today? The transformed creature actually grew. It felt like raising a pet, a fulfilling feeling. Ice and snow once again covered the path to the shelter. Elsewhere, Ino slowly opened his suitcase. He planned to transplant the ice flowers from the traceless extension space. While planting them in the suitcase was relatively safe, even providing a positioning and defensive function, planting them in the shelter would completely transform the environment, eliminating the fear of anacondas devouring all the snow. He crawled into the traceless extension box. Although he hadn't been here for over 2 months, everything inside was still familiar. There were piles of dried food and candy, a long unused accordion, and that mysterious blue ice flower seedling. The difference was that the seedling, once 2 inches tall, had grown considerably, now measuring about a foot tall. The crystal clear leaves, like meticulously carved ice jade, each young leaf shone a unique icy blue hue. Crouching, he carefully scraped the soil around it, then used a levitation spell to remove the box, along with the accordion. The moment he emerged, the faint connection he had previously felt with the traceless extension box was quietly severed. Ino had no regrets about this. After all, this wasn't Newt's magical suitcase, and he wouldn't mind losing it. He now had the safer and more convenient storage space of the shelter. In comparison, this seemingly mysterious seedling became more important, because from the beginning, he had always believed that the seedling's purpose was more than just to modify the environment. Meanwhile, just as Ino had finished planting the seedling and was returning to his dormitory to watch Draco practice, outside the castle, on the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch, 2 groups of people were already facing each other. The Quidditch players from Gryffindor and Slytherin split into 2 teams, standing quietly behind their respective captains in a silent demonstration of confrontation. "Hey, Wood, what do you want? Are you looking for trouble?" At the front of the crowd, Slytherin Quidditch captain Marcus Flint sneered. It's our practice time. We got up super early, so please get out. Gryffindor Quidditch Captain Oliver Wood, upon being called out, roared angrily. Flint, a massive figure, and a fellow graduating senior, consistently dominated Wood, a year his junior. Flint suddenly smiled, revealing his signature buck teeth, and replied, "There's plenty of room here, Wood." The Slytherin team hadn't brought any girls with them today. They stood shoulder to shoulder, glancing sideways at the Gryffindor players with a haughty air. "But I've booked the pitch." Wood snapped. "I've booked it. Professor Lockhart has signed permission for us to do this." PFFT. Lockhart. Ha ha ha. Flint laughed exaggeratedly. "Wood, I have to say, this trick of yours is more effective than just guarding the goal. You're making me laugh to death, and it's leaving me no energy left to fight for the quaffle." After a while, Flint's laughter gradually subsided. "Speaking of approval, I have a special note signed by Professor Snape." Flint pulled a small piece of parchment from his pocket and read aloud, "I, Professor Severus Snape, give permission for the Slytherin team to train on the Quidditch pitch today to train their new seeker. So, you'd better give way." "What nonsense. We also have Professor Lockhart's special permission. Are you denying Professor Lockhart's legitimacy?" Seeing that Wood was losing confidence, George cleverly retorted, "Wait, a new seeker? Who is it?" As captain, Wood was more concerned about the changes in the opponent's lineup. After all, missing a day of training isn't a big deal, but not knowing the opponent's lineup ahead of time and making unreasonable arrangements is the most terrifying thing. A new book has been released, and I'd like to thank everyone for their support. Please add it to my collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Please add it to my collection. Please recommend it. Please give me a monthly pass. Chapter 97 The Threat from the Frost Python. As Wood finished speaking, a smaller boy emerged from the Slytherin team. He had platinum blonde hair and a faint smile on his pale cheeks. Draco had been silent, waiting for this moment to appear under everyone's attention. He first glanced at the crowd opposite, and then locked onto two targets, Scarhead and his poor follower. As for Hermione on the side, Draco chose to ignore her. After all, he had heard some rumors that the Gryffindor witch, a Muggle-born witch, was close to Ino. "I'm Slytherin's new seeker." Although Draco spoke in a flat tone, the smugness in his eyes could not be concealed. At the same time, Flint also took over the conversation. "This is our new seeker, Mr. Draco Malfoy. We've also received a generous gift from Mr. Lucius Malfoy for the Slytherin team, the latest model, released just last month." As he spoke, Flint unveiled his broom, hidden by his robes, and gently brushed off the non-existent dust from the top. His gesture served as a signal for the other Quidditch players to follow suit. The latest Nimbus model, the Nimbus 2001. As for those still using the Sideswipe or Comet series, I urge them to give up now. Instead of wasting time training, they should think about how to face the disappointed eyes of the house. Flint struck at Wood's weak spot. He knew that, unlike other Quidditch players, Wood aspired to join the professional team. House Cup glory was often a key criterion for professional Quidditch teams. After Flint finished speaking, the training ground fell silent for a moment. Draco's face lit up. He loved watching scenes like this, watching the Gryffindors' gloomy faces. "At least we still have the Nimbus 2000, Hermione suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence. "Even if its performance is a little worse, it's not by much. I've read Quidditch, The Origins of Quidditch. For thousands of years, starting in the 11th century, people have always competed in flying skills and teamwork, not broomstick performance. Perhaps it's because the spectator sees more clearly than the Gryffindors, who are limited to broomstick specifications." Hermione's macroscopic analysis and dialectic was like a shot on the arm, revitalizing the young lion's present. This action, however, irritated Draco, and his temper flared. He launched into a barrage of abuse. You buck-toothed bunny, what's your business? Is this the place for you? Why don't you go get those two buck teeth fixed?" Draco wanted to call her a mudblood, but luckily, he retained a shred of sanity. The moment the words left his mouth, he abruptly shifted his attack, choosing to focus on Hermione's most prominent front teeth. "Oh wow. Merlin, I just noticed. You seem to have had them fixed, but why don't you do it more thoroughly? And by the way, comb that messy hair of yours, and stop running around like a poodle all day. At least be presentable, so you can be worthy of being Ino's friend." Draco's words grew more and more enjoyable, and he accidentally let out his truest thoughts. Hermione, on the other hand, stood there frozen, her red eyes brimming with tears from the barrage of attacks. Seeing Hermione crying, the Gryffindors, remarkably united, drew their wands. Similarly, the Slytherins, led by Flint, dropped their brooms and drew their wands. A brawl seemed inevitable. Just then, a fine snowflake began to fall. Though light, it blanketed the Quidditch training ground. "Draco, since you know Hermione is my friend, why are you hurling insults at me?" Ino's voice was cold. He had intended to join in the fun, but his arrival on the Quidditch pitch had been met with such a dreadful ordeal. In a way, both Hermione and Draco were his friends, but precisely because of that, nothing could be more heartbreaking. Hearing Draco's verbal attacks on Hermione, he watched as the two sides drew their wands, preparing for a brawl. In such a situation, without some intimidation, it would be impossible to intimidate these senior wizards. To this end, Ino not only used his ice magic as a precaution, but also released the sanctuary's 40-foot-long Amazonian anaconda. The barrel-thick snake crouched at his feet, its body moving smoothly and serpentinely, its pupilless ice-blue eyes occasionally scanning the young wizards on either side. This caused everyone to retreat wherever Ino passed, allowing him to easily walk into the crowd. "Apologize, Draco. You shouldn't insult a girl like that, especially when she hasn't offended you at all," Ino said calmly. As he paused, the massive anaconda slowly raised its head. Unlike its earlier crawling form, it now coiled up, standing upright at over 4 meters, its intimidating power suddenly increasing. Under the giant snake's gaze, Draco was filled with regret. He knew full well that this witch was related to Ino, yet he couldn't stop cursing. This was the first time he'd seen Ino serious. Though a little frightened, he still looked at Hermione tremblingly. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have teased you. I'm sorry." Seeing Draco's apology, Ino turned and walked towards Hermione. Looking at the tearful brown ball, he slowly reached out and gently smoothed the hair from Hermione's forehead. He apologized too. "Don't be sad. If anyone bullies you again, tell me." As Ino spoke, he looked up and around. Whether Slytherin or Gryffindor, everyone's eyes were subconsciously averted. Snowflakes drifted from the sky, and a frost anaconda over 40 feet long coiled on the ground. This brawl was doomed to end, and just when everyone thought it was about to end, another cold voice came from the side. "Potter. 10 points from Gryffindor for attempting to stir up trouble between the houses." A familiar voice rang out, and Harry closed his eyes helplessly. He felt even more like crying than Hermione. He hadn't said a word the entire time. Not a single word. Snape walked into the crowd, his expressionless face fixed on them. "You guys still here? Do you want to be put in detention for staying here?" At that, everyone turned and headed for the training ground gate. Upon seeing Snape, Ino decisively lifted the spell, and the anaconda was returned to its sanctuary. Just as he and Hermione were about to leave, Snape suddenly appeared before them. "Come to my office," Snape said, his tone unchanged. But unlike the emptiness in his eyes just now, there was now a strange glint in them. "Yes, Professor." Ino smiled and nodded. He turned and patted Hermione's shoulder, giving her a reassuring look, and made the gesture of writing a note. Then he stood there, quietly watching Hermione's back as she walked away. On the other side, Snape remained silent for the first time. After a moment, when Hermione was far away, Snape turned around, swung his black robe, and walked towards the castle without saying a word. Seeing this, Ino followed closely behind. New book release. Thank you all for your support. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote. Chapter 98 Snape's Special Treatment. Hogwarts Potions Office. Unlike the nervousness he'd felt the first time he arrived, Ino was now somewhat relaxed. Perhaps it was the confidence brought on by magic. While he still couldn't defeat Snape, after a year, he felt he had the nerve to face him head-on. It was like a leopard seeing a lion. It was powerless in a head-on confrontation, but when it came to escaping or attacking from the back, it had some leverage. After all, a leopard wasn't a harmless antelope, it had teeth and claws. Before the summer break, Professor Flitwick had said his magical power was approaching that of a fourth-year wizard. Even without counting the past few months, just from that spiritual baptism in the room of requirement, he could clearly feel a significant increase in his magical power. Of course, with magic being something so intangible and intangible, He couldn't quantify the exact amount. But a sense of confidence had quietly emerged. The potions office was located beneath the castle, so the light was always dim. By the dim light of the candle, Ino took in his surroundings as best he could. But besides countless glass jars of specimens, the shelves along the walls held books that looked somewhat like banned texts. Don't cause trouble. Do you think Hogwarts is everything? Oh. You live under a bridge, you wouldn't know that. There are 11 schools of magic in the world, but that's still not everything. Snape spoke calmly from his chair, his expression blurred in the dim light. Professor. I didn't cause trouble, really. I simply intervened. If I had wanted to cause trouble, Hogwarts would have been in turmoil last year. Besides, I'm not qualified or capable of causing trouble. Ino replied with a smile, having heard Snape's underlying message. The wizarding world is indeed complex. After all, wizards generally live much longer than muggles. Furthermore, there are wizards like Nicholas Flamel, who lived for over 600 years. Although Nicholas is likely dead now, this also proves that the wizarding world is not the secluded, castle-based melodrama portrayed in the original story. Besides, he never considered this world, with its time-turners, Felixir, and extension charms, to be a simple one. Time, space, destiny, high-level magic, even in any story world, would be a ceiling. Just as his thoughts drifted, Snape's voice echoed through the room again. It seems you understand me. That's good, it proves you're not foolish or arrogant. Unlike some reckless men who achieved fame through sacrifice, and now have almost forgotten who they are. Though the tone was sarcastic, Ino heard the kindness in the words, and he also understood the reckless man's illusion. Honestly, for Snape to say such words was practically heartfelt. Although somewhat puzzled by Snape's sudden change of heart, Ino continued the conversation, whispering, Professor, fame is not achievement. Some are pushed to undeserved heights by fate, which makes them elated, dizzy, and ultimately terrified. Don't be so eloquent. Snape suddenly interrupted. If you're not showing off, why not practice magic, or learn potions? Today you might be able to forcefully stop a conflict and protect. I mean, you might be able to protect the honor of the house. But what about next time? What if they outnumber you? What if they catch you off guard? Snape's tone seemed to hold a hint of anger. Thank you for your advice, Professor. Ino had probably figured out what was wrong with Snape. This terrifying story was quite immersive. However, considering his well-intentioned nature from the beginning, his tone, though questionable, wasn't offensive. Meanwhile, Snape pointed coldly at a bookshelf and sarcastically said, There's an old textbook in the middle drawer on the third shelf on the left. Take it and read it. You'll have to avoid doing nothing all day and causing trouble with your half-baked magic. Hearing this, Ino stood up and bowed slightly to Snape without saying anything. Turning to the third row of bookshelves on the left, one looked at least a decade old. Constructed entirely of sturdy oak, the distinct wood grain on the shelves resembled a natural work of art, profound and full of charm. Opening the center drawer, he saw an old, yellowed copy of Advanced Potion Making, a common textbook for 5th through 7th years at Hogwarts. Judging by its style and color, the book before him looked like it had been stored for at least 15 years. The moment he saw the book, Ino had a few guesses. But after flipping through it and seeing the densely packed notes, he knew the answer. Thank you again, Professor Snape. I will read it carefully and return it to you as soon as possible. Although Snape's response was only silence, he wasn't annoyed at all. After all, some people are just naturally like that. Leaving the potions office, Ino suppressed his inner joy. The Half-Blood Prince's notes were one of the few good things in the castle. Because it not only contained incredibly practical spells like Hanging Bell, Blocking Ears, and Locking Tongue and Sealing Throat, it also contained Snape's exclusive spell, God's Shadow, a powerful poisonous dark magic. Wizards injured by the God's Shadow were completely resistant to conventional treatment. Neither white savory essence nor healing spells had any effect, leaving the victim to bleed to death. If it weren't for its corresponding counterspell, its terrifying lethality alone would likely have been classified as a supreme dark curse, on par with the 3 unforgivable curses. Furthermore, the God's Shadow is an invisible magic, even more difficult to predict and defend against than the Killing Curse. As expected of the Half-Blood Prince, he's a good dean, cursing a second-year wizard in his own academy. Ino murmured with a smile in the basement corridor. He was already impatient. How could he just glance over such an art book? He had to copy it. If it weren't for the inherent magical power of a powerful wizard's notes, he would have wanted to use a spell to make a copy. Of course, this is just a thought. The notes written by powerful wizards cannot be copied by magic, not even an automatic writing quill can be used. If you want to preserve them, there is no way to cheat. You can only do it yourself and copy it word by word honestly. I have to buy a book Advanced Potion Making in advance, and find Davis to customize musical instruments. Ino was secretly thinking about his future plans in his heart. He planned to violate the school rules once and take advantage of this weekend to secretly return to Hogsmeade and solve all these things at once. Meow, the monthly tickets will be doubled in the next 2 days. Don't save them, give them to Zyoti, otherwise it will expire. Please collect. Please recommend. Please vote. Chapter 99. Do you want the same doll as Scarhead? In the dim basement corridor, Ino walked alone towards the Slytherin dormitories, pondering his weekend plans as he walked. Buying books was easy enough, he could simply write to the bookstore and have an owl send enough galleons. But having Davis custom-made an instrument required an in-person meeting. Furthermore, he needed to have the finished instrument and the tune ready before the Quidditch season began in the second half of the year. After all, if he wanted to play a captivating World Cup theme song, an accordion alone wouldn't be enough. Violins, harps, clarinets, timpani, without a dozen or so instruments, it wouldn't be possible to create a beautiful piece. Davis Banks, the Hogsmeade repair shop, specialized in repairing and refurbishing various magical items. But Davis occasionally crafted interesting gadgets, and the self-playing accordion was one of them. Ino had originally purchased it in Diagon Alley, but chanced upon the maker in Hogsmeade. After a brief conversation, he abandoned the idea of making his own. Though it was just a simple self-playing accordion, it involved a vast amount of alchemical knowledge, an entire discipline, far more challenging than he had imagined. The Slytherin dormitories and the potions office were both located in the castle basement. Ino returned to his dormitories in just 5 or 6 minutes. He opened the door to Draco's quiet figure. Seeing this, Ino knew he was angry, but some things had to be handled with reason, as the saying goes. Unlike the original story, this time Hermione hadn't actually provoked Draco, she was simply commenting on Quidditch based on the facts. Draco's venomous response was, by any measure, unjustified. This was why he insisted on Draco's apology, even though his tone was a bit harsh. But there was no other way. In that situation, facing a Quidditch team whose average age was 5th year, if he didn't put on a cold front and instead put on a cheerful expression, he'd be completely unstoppable. Not only would he be unable to mediate, he'd probably become a laughingstock. Looking at the still angry Draco, Ino tapped his finger, and a foot square of ice condensed in midair. Then, drawing his wand, he gradually stretched and shaped the ice through transfiguration. A few minutes later, a lifelike miniature figure, approximately 20 centimeters tall, floated in midair. Though its entire body was icy and colorless, its features and signature scar made it clear it belonged to a star seeker from a certain house. Ino used the levitation charm to guide the figure toward Draco. Here. And how about I teach you a spell to keep it suspended in midair? Meanwhile, Draco deliberately turned around when he heard the door open. Although he realized his mistake after calming down, it was a mistake, but it still irritated him. Now, after seeing the puppet, he seemed to have found some kind of reason to convince himself, and he gradually relaxed. I know. You embarrassed me with so many people around just now, Draco said, his tone slightly complaining. I'm sorry, but you certainly didn't do the right thing. Let's talk calmly now. In that situation, if you could have stood up to Wood, or even the entire Gryffindor, wouldn't that have been more satisfying than scolding a little girl? And I had to be fair back then, otherwise we'd have had to fight. Don't underestimate the courage of those lions. Ino didn't wait for Draco to reply, and continued, the brave draw their swords against the stronger in anger, while the cowardly draw their swords against the weaker in anger. I don't expect my friends to be brave, because that's foolish. But at the same time, I don't want my friends to be cowards either. In fact, I would rather you all be the stronger ones. Draco, sometimes it's not a big deal to embarrass yourself once, what's terrible is to charge forward without the ability, only to embarrass yourself every time. After speaking in one breath, Ino sat quietly aside, giving Draco some time to think. Similarly, a brief silence fell in the dormitory. A long moment passed. I know, honestly, I've never thought about this. Back then, when I was very young, I lived with my mother in a safe house. Malfoy Manor was abandoned, and I rarely saw my father during that time. When we did, he always seemed anxious and in a hurry. Draco looked a little downcast, but he still raised his head and stared at the dormitory ceiling. Back then, the thing I heard most was the need to restore the Malfoy family's centuries-old glory. So I cared deeply about honor, but no one ever told me how to achieve it. I also knew that their respect for me was actually for my father, for our galleons, even for Goyle and Crabbe. At this point, Draco slowly turned his head, his eyes bright, even glowing. Until just now, I kind of understood how to gain honor and respect. It's not Quidditch, it's not report cards, it's not extra points from the house, it's not praise from the professors. The true way to gain honor and respect is to be strong, just like you did on the training grounds. Flint, Wood, Scarhead, Red Weasley, even everyone here just now, they're all afraid of you, so they have to respect you, and no one dares to contradict you. So, I know, teach me magic. Not those little tricks, I want to learn real magic. Ino sat quietly in his chair. At that moment, he once again felt that stories were just stories. Whether it was Draco before him, or Pansy, or the many others, they weren't just characters in a story, briefly glimpsed or briefly mentioned. They were all living people, flesh and blood, with emotions, memories, and aspirations. Seeing Draco's expectant eyes, Ino nodded seriously. Okay. I'll teach you magic, real magic. At the other end of the castle, in the potions office, Snape sat alone at his desk, his eyes closed, seemingly lost in thought. His figure seemed remarkably still in the dim light. From a distance, he seemed like a motionless sculpture. But closer inspection revealed that the sculpted form wasn't entirely still. Beneath his black robes, his chest rose and fell slightly, each breath silently proclaiming his presence. And it was precisely this subtle sign of life that shattered the sculptural stillness. Time passed quietly, and Snape remained motionless in this position. For a long moment, the stillness was broken. Potter. Snape's voice was as calm as ever. Even calmer than ever before, as still as a pool of stagnant water. In the Slytherin dormitory. A round table, covered with potted plants, lay an old copy of Advanced Potion Making. Ino was hunched over the table, copying something down. Across the dormitory, Draco, wand in hand, practiced magic on a frost doll. Throat lock. Hanging bell. Fing chong. Meow, double your monthly tickets for the next 2 days. Don't save it, give it to Zyodi, otherwise it will expire. Please collect it. Please recommend. Please vote. Chapter 100 Professor Binns's Answer. Across the endless river of time, like a silent painter, quietly depicts the transformations of the world with its delicate brushstrokes. As time passes, those once passionate, heart-stirring moments gradually lose their luster under the erosion of time. Peace reigns supreme in the castle, flowing gently like a stream, unheard and unhurried. During such days, the young wizards savor the little moments of their lives. Horizontal ellipsis. At the end of October, the temperature at Hogwarts had already dropped into the single digits. Despite the chill, everyone was excited, for they were about to usher in the first holiday of the school year, Halloween. On October 31st, the day of the Halloween dinner, although the official holiday wasn't until the next day, the entire castle was enveloped in a mysterious and eerie atmosphere. Portraits adorned the corridor walls, each dressed in their own unique Halloween attire. Some wore pointy wizard hats, others draped in black cloaks. They laughed and chatted, as if celebrating this special occasion themselves. Today, the young wizards were destined to have no time for classes, not even potions or transfiguration. Of course, if they were lucky enough to have history of magic today, they could get a good night's sleep, fully rested for the evening's banquet. After all, no one expected a ghostly professor to be angry. Yes, history of magic Professor Binns Cuthbert was a ghost. He was once a professor of profound knowledge, sharp thinking, and clear thinking. But one day, during a class, he forgot his body in the common room, and since then, Hogwarts has had a ghostly professor. Although Professor Binns was a ghost, this unique identity did not affect his outstanding teaching of history of magic. He continued to impart his knowledge to his students. On the second floor of the castle, in the history of magic classroom, the young wizards occupied half of the classroom, clearly divided according to their respective houses. However, at this moment, whether Slytherin or the Hufflepuff next to them, Everyone maintained a unified posture, propping their chins with thick pages of history of magic, then closed their eyes and fell into deep sleep. Professor Binns was quite interesting. He never called a roll, nor did he care what the students were doing. It was as if the only thing in the world was the classroom and him. His unchanging, monotonous voice recited the contents of a book that was clearly older than the textbook in his hands. It all sounded like a rigid, programmed tape recorder, making history of magic class a universally acknowledged sleep-inducing activity for young wizards. However, on the left side of the classroom, in the Slytherin-dominated territory, there was one exception. Ino not only listened with rapt interest to Professor Binns's lecture on the history of magic, but also diligently scribbled notes on the parchment with his automatic quill. While others might find the history of magic dry and boring, he saw it as a magical epic: dragons, wizards, potions, spells, and even human love affairs with intelligent magical creatures, if one ignored the hypnotic tone, of course. Today's history of magic class still held his interest, as Professor Binns was covering modern history. Muggles weren't as weak as wizards imagined, especially after they took up flaming weapons. Forced to hide in the dark corners of the world, wizards finally couldn't stand it anymore. Fed up with this life of constant danger, a miraculous spell was invented. This was also the most crucial turning point in magical history. Based on the Exorcist charm, a new Muggle Exorcist charm emerged. Though there wasn't a bard's cadence, Ino listened with rapt interest. Today's knowledge also confirmed his earlier observations: the magical world was anything but simple. Throughout magical history, he'd observed that whenever wizards faced an unsolvable, existentially threatening problem, a specific spell would inevitably be invented. Take, for example, the infamous Dementors, these unkillable, inexorable creatures that feed on emotions and souls. Many wizards at the time trembled in fear of these creatures, but it wasn't long before the ancient white magic of the Patronus charm was invented. The same was true of the Muggle repelling charm. Under the threat of firearms, a Muggle repelling charm, devoid of rules and even somewhat unreasonable, was simply created. Professor Binns's lecture continued. After the spell was cast, the Muggles could only dazedly flee from the wizard's sight, as if nothing had happened. Even their well-trained army was the same. They could not find the enemy, nor even remember who it was. Let us remember this turning point, the turning point that ensured the continuation of the wizarding world. Now, we salute this spell. Take out your wands, turn them twice, lower them, then quickly raise them. Say it with me, Aladimobi Udayampa. It's that simple. Although now a ghost, Professor Binns still had a translucent wand. But Ino didn't care about that at the moment. He was now meticulously practicing the Muggle repelling charm according to Professor Binns' instructions. Aradimobi Udayampa. A flash of light flashed from the tip of the Elder Wand. Though he couldn't see any effect, he had a feeling the spell had been cast successfully. Learning an obscure spell during an ordinary history of magic class was a delightful little surprise. Thinking of this, Ino couldn't help but raise his hand. After getting Professor Binns's permission, he asked, "Professor, I have a question. Muggles have cameras, even cameras that can record continuously. I mean, if they use cameras to film wizards, wouldn't the Muggle repelling charm be ineffective?" He didn't dare mention cameras, satellites, or mobile phones. After all, challenging the knowledge of an old scholar was terrifying. "Your question is interesting." Professor Binns was like an old machine being run into trouble. "Excellent. It's been years since anyone asked a question in history of magic class." Professor Binns seemed like a completely different person. Not only did he no longer pause, but his voice and tone were full of energy, even though he was still in his translucent ghostly state. "Actually, you can ask me as many tricky questions as you want, but I only have one answer: never underestimate wizards." Professor Binns paused briefly, then added with a confident tone, "Wizards have a long history, much longer than Muggles. And throughout this long history, we've encountered far more severe and dangerous situations. That's why we believe in magic, and magic hasn't let us down. So, whether it's the camera you mentioned, or something even more powerful, when there's a serious threat to wizarding survival, new spells will always emerge to deal with them. It's just that this process involves suffering and sacrifice. Please vote." Also, Zaya Odie has confirmed that the book will be released on May Day, and there will be a huge wave of updates that day. I'll guarantee at least 5 updates, and Zaya Odie will do my best to update as often as possible. Finally, thank you all for your support. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.